Okay. Right, good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome to the December Planning Committee. Welcome to those of you joining us on webcast. Always welcome. We will go straight into the agenda. Apologies before I do that. We're running a bit late. We had IT difficulties, which the officers have kindly sorted out. So we are in a position that we can go straight on to the agenda. Urgent business.
None received, Chair.
Okay. Item 1A is the supplementary information applications being considered. Director of Planning, any change?
No, Chair. The late representations have been circulated.
Thanks very much. Appeals?
None received, Chair.
None received. Interest? Councillor Leach?
Thank you, Chair. I need to declare an interest in item 11 in Jessiefield in my ward, because I'd expressed a view on this before I became a member of the committee. And I also need to, I'm told by the city solicitor that I need to also declare an interest in item 6, because I'd previously said something that could be construed as being opposed to this application. So I won't take part in that debate at all.
Thanks very much, Councillor Leach. Councillor Davis?
Thank you, Chair. I need to express an interest in item 7. I have previously, prior to joining the committee, engaged with residents and along with colleagues committed to support their objections to this application back in March 2019. So I won't be taking part as a member of this committee. However, I would like to be the ward councillor who speaks on that.
Thanks, Councillor Davis. And the same will go for Councillor Leach. He wants to speak on the item before he withdraws. And Director of Planning, absolutely nothing wrong with that. Thanks. Now, item 4 on the agenda is the minutes of the meetings from the 19th of November. First of all, is there anything, any matters arising from the minutes that any member wants to raise? And I'm just looking at my screen to make sure that I can see everyone. It looks like we don't have anyone on screen.
Lord Mayor.
So we have them moved by Councillor Andrews. Because we're doing a hybrid meeting, I'm going to have to ask Andrew Woods to do the usual roll call. Andrew, please, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Shaukat Ali.
Agree.
Councillor Andrews.
Agreed.
Councillor Yasmin Dar.
Can you hear us, Yasmin? We're doing the minutes.
Agreed.
Councillor Davis.
Agreed.
Councillor Hitchin.
Agreed.
Councillor Kamal.
Agreed.
Councillor Leach.
Agreed.
Councillor Lovesey.
Agreed.
Councillor Monaghan.
Can you hear us, Madeleine? We'll move on, Andrew.
Okay. Councillor Rysat.
Agreed.
Councillor White.
Agreed.
Councillor Nazrin Ali.
Agreed.
And Councillor Curley.
Abstain. I make that 12 and 1 abstentions. Is that right, Andrew?
That's right, Chair.
Thanks. The next item on the agenda is item number 5, and this is 1C Arden Road, Crumsall. Can I invite the officers to introduce this? Des?
Thank you, Chair.
To begin with, I'd like to draw members' attention to the late representation, which clarifies aspects of the revised plans and corrects a couple of minor errors within the report. In particular, the report states that the single-storey element of the side extension would be flush with the front of the main house, whereas it projects forward of the front of the main house. The proposed elevations and floor plans within the report clearly show what is proposed within the submitted drawings. Chair, if members agree with the recommendation, then it will be necessary to revise the wording of condition 9, which relates to tree protection, in order to ensure an appointed tree consultant supervises the excavation element and ensure that adequate protection is in place to ensure root protection during construction, and to also have a separate additional condition which requires details of levels in the rear garden to ensure the soft areas are retained within the rear garden area and that levels are agreed. Chair, we've also received an additional correspondence from a planning consultant representing a neighbouring occupier, which claims that the advice given to committee by officers within the report in relation to the assessment and conclusions reached on the impact on the conservation area is deficient and may be seriously and materially misleading to members. Reference is particularly made to section 72 of the Planning Listed Building and Conservation Areas Act, paragraph 193 and paragraph 194 of the National Planning Policy Framework. Chair, I would advise members that officers are satisfied that the relevant guidance has been fully considered and taken into account in the assessment and recommendation made to members and is proportionate to the scheme proposed. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much indeed, Mr. Jones. Can I call now on the one of the objectors? I think this is Mr. Thompson, to please join us.
Yes, can you
Yes,
hear
we
me
can
okay?
hear you.
Okay. Thank you. Then I'll begin. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, good afternoon. In summary, my concerns remain the harm to the conservation area, the street scene, and the occupants of 1D Ardern Road. Criticisms have been made of the quality of the conservation area, but those criticisms are not informed by a proper analysis and understanding of the characteristics and features which underpinned the decision to include this side of Ardern Road in the conservation area. Your officers have chosen neither to seek advice from a conservation specialist nor to review and report to you on the conservation area appraisal. In an effort to provide some balance, I have submitted information on the history and character of the area, and I stress the word area. The applicant and your officers focus too much on the building to which it is proposed to attach the extensions. The character and appearance of the conservation area is much more than that. It is also the space around and between the buildings in the area. The statutory duty of the council to preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area rests with you. You cannot fulfil that duty by approving a scheme which would harm that character and appearance, and several times the report by your officers confirms there would be harm. There are no public benefits which outweigh this harm. Even if the proposal did comply with basic council criteria on design and appearance, that is to be expected of all schemes. Any benefit to the applicant is a private benefit. There is no evidence before you to suggest there is an overriding need for 6-bed homes, and even if there were, then it would need to be balanced against the effect of losing an affordable 3-bed home, ideal for a young family. Furthermore, it is not a question of only balancing supposed public benefits against less than substantial harm, because government guidance says any harm to the conservation area must be given great weight and should not be permitted unless there is a clear and convincing justification, which there is not in this case. Nor do the proposals meet the requirements of the council guidelines and policies. That the degree of non-compliance is not now so great as in the hopelessly non-compliant scheme the applicant originally submitted does not make them acceptable. A gap of 0.65 metres to the side boundary is less than half the 1.52 metres which should be retained. It would lead to a terracing effect, which the proposed 1 metre setback at the front would not compensate for, and which approach is not supported by the council guidelines. The terracing effect would be out of keeping with the character of this part of the street and conservation area. To allow a rear extension of 4 metres is not just inappropriate because it exceeds the council 3.65 metre guideline, but because the extension would significantly limit the daylight and sunlight available to the nearest ground floor window of 1D Ardern Road and would unduly dominate the outlook from that room. In conclusion, the proposed development would harm the conservation area, the street scene and the amenity of the neighbour. In my letter of 21st of October, I set out detailed, specific proposed reasons for refusal. I urge you to move to refuse this application for the reasons I set out. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thank you for your time and attention.
Thanks very much, Mr. Thompson. Now can I call Mr. Roberts, please? I'm informed by the committee services that Mr. Roberts is not present, so we have made provision for him to speak, but he's not here. That's unfortunate. So the ward councillors have not asked to speak. So we can ask at this point now then for Mr. Jones, is there anything you want to add or say at this point?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, it's worth saying that the scheme has been substantially revised since it was first submitted. The two-storey side extension includes a setback at first floor level and there's a gap to a boundary, which removes the terracing effect, Chair, and a reduced height of the ridge, which creates a sense of space and subservience within the conservation area. So those impacts on the conservation are considered to be appropriate, Chair. The existing house is a fairly modern property, and the scheme would have a very low level of harm on the character of the conservation area, with the public benefits outweighing that very low level of harm. Chair, the public benefits include updating a family house, extensions being sympathetic and subservient to the original property, and improvements to the front boundary treatment and frontage generally. Chair, the scheme has been properly and thoroughly tested against national and local policy, as I stated at the start of this item, and on that basis, Chair, the recommendation remains one of approve. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Des. Thanks for that. Now, we did a site visit this morning to have a look for ourselves as members of the Planning Committee. So can I now invite members of the Planning Committee for their views? I want to see Councillor Paul Andrews.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I move the officer's recommendation with the amended condition 9 and the additional recommendation regarding levels in the rear garden, Chair?
Thanks very much, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Leach.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies that I wasn't at the site visit, but I did go to see the site on another occasion. Just really had a question about one of my many bugbears, and this is waste disposal and the width of the space that's left once the extension is built. I think it suggests on page 33 that the width is 1.096 metres at its widest and down to 0.65 metres at its narrowest. I'm not convinced that that's wide enough to get a green bin, which is bigger than the other bins that we have in residential properties. I'm not convinced that it's actually wide enough to get a bin down the side.
Thanks, Councillor Leach. Des.
Yeah, Chair, this was raised with the applicant and agent, and they've submitted drawings that show that wheelie bins will fit down the side even with the fence in place. On that basis, Chair, it's recommended for approval. There is space within the front garden as well for the storage if there's any difficulties of getting one of the bins down the side. So, but Chair, our understanding is that bins would fit through that gap into the rear of the property, Chair.
Thanks very much, Des. Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was very useful to see the site this morning and to see the wider conservation area with the other members of the committee. My query was regarding the drawings on page 16 and the rear garden. It shows the rear garden beyond the extension with the 4 wheelie bins that have just been referred to on pretty much a flat garden. And that's replicated on the drawing below, which shows the other elevation. After standing in the garden this morning, I think it's going to be difficult for that garden to be flat. So can you just confirm what the levels will be in the back garden once the development has been finished? Because I think the drawings may not represent that fully. Thank you.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Chair. The other it is difficult to read, but the other drawing does state grassy knoll retained. It is difficult to read that on page 17, but the condition we've recommended would require existing and proposed levels to be agreed with ourselves prior to that work taking place. So we would have control over that to make sure that you know, as much of that is retained as possible with the flat element just next to the side extension, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Davies.
Thank you. Yes, I was also on the site visit this morning and was a bit surprised at the extent of the slope in the back garden. When I look at this, it seems to me that we've got a small house and there are a number of ways to extend it. You can extend the front door by introducing a front dormer, a rear dormer, a side extension or a rear extension on the ground floor. And they've chosen 3 of those. I believe they originally chose 4 and have been persuaded to reduce that application to 3. It sort of slightly reminds me about those plastic toys that are quite neat and then you open them out and they're huge, and it is quite a considerable expansion in provision and a considerable reduction of what is quite a small garden. I think the one that would bring me most concern was the rear extension, and you could see that there would obviously be an impact on the adjacent property. I believe that's 1D, and probably an impact on the light on their rear windows at ground floor level particularly. There's a reference here to 3.65 metres as being the guideline for that sort of development, and here they're going for 4 metres. Now, I know it's not a great deal of difference, 0.35 metres, so about a foot, but I just wonder why that is. What's the purpose of the 3.65 initially as a guideline? Under what circumstances is it normally acceptable to exceed that guideline, and whether or not in exceeding that, decisions about exceeding that guideline, whether the extent of the extensions elsewhere on the property are taken into consideration with regard to that.
Thank you, Chair. The 3.65 metres is a guideline that's been established by old council guidance. The national guidance now allows prior approvals for extensions much larger than 3.65 under a prior approval notification, so permitted development has exceeded those prior guidance. We need to take that into account. We also need to assess the application on its merits. When it first came in, that extension was much longer, but given the fact it's got a flat roof, given the orientation, the relationship to the window, it's considered to be acceptable in these circumstances, Chair, and any impacts would not result in such harm to warrant a refusal in the opinion of officers in the revised scheme, Chair.
Thanks for that, Mr. Johns. Councillor Lovesey.
Thanks, Chair. Again, I found the site visit this morning very, very useful to get a sense of the wider conservation area and the location of this particular property within that. These kinds of applications, I think we all find them quite difficult. Clearly, we've got a need for larger size family housing. On the one hand, on the other hand, we have existing adopted conservation areas, and on balance, I come out feeling that that must mean something. When I looked at the street scene this morning and thought about the way that the initial application has been modified, I felt the side extension was acceptable, and possibly I wasn't that keen on the dormer and the introduction of a different feature of this kind within the street scene, but perhaps that would be acceptable too. But my overall feeling was that within a conservation area, I can't quite see how we can allow the footprint of a house to be changed quite as much as this. We are really filling up that back area, leaving no sense of space at all there whatsoever. And I do feel this issue of preserving or enhancing is something we must take seriously. And therefore, on balance, I'm going to be minded to refuse this application on the basis that I do feel the combination of side and your rear extension really is too much for the plot that we're looking at. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Lovesey. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I'd state, yeah, the scheme has been substantially revised since it was first submitted to a point on balance where officers consider that those impacts are such that we can recommend approval, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Jones. Anyone else want to come in? Councillor Shawkat Ali.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much. Like all the other colleagues said, that it was very useful this morning's site visit to see ourselves. I mean, I know that when the application initially came in, it was way too big, and revised plans are acceptable, except the rear extension. I know one of the member mentioned the wheelie bins. I mean, if we half of the green space available at the back is will be covered now, and we will have to deal with 4 wheelie bins, not 1 or 2, 4 wheelie bins, and the state of the back garden is like a slope. So I don't know. Thinking that I will not be able to support this application.
Thanks, Councillor Ali. Mr. Jones, any comments?
I don't think there's much more I can add, Chair.
Thanks, Des. Thanks very much indeed. Now, anyone else?
Chair, could we move to...
Yes, Councillor Hitchin.
Chair, it was good opportunity to see this to see this today on the site visit. So I did welcome that visit and to say thank you for arranging that. Could we move to the vote, please, if nobody else wants to speak?
So you're seconding, Councillor Andrews moved the recommendation with the... You're seconding. And you also added that bit in, that
I'm
addition...
just suggesting, Chair, that I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with the amended condition 9 and the additional condition regarding the levels in the rear garden, Chair.
Thanks for that, Councillor Andrews. That's very clear. Over to you, Andrew, if you can do the roll call again, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Shawkat Ali.
I will abstain the vote.
Councillor Andrews.
Approve.
Councillor Yasmin Dar.
Approve.
Councillor Davies.
Approve.
Councillor Hitchin.
Approve.
Councillor Kamal.
Approve.
Councillor Leach.
Approve.
Councillor Lovesey.
Minded to refuse.
Councillor Monaghan.
Madeline, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh,
How are you voting, Madeline? Madeline, can you hear us? We haven't got your vote yet.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm so sorry, I'm having terrible difficulties with the sound today. I didn't hear quite a bit of that, so I don't think I'll be able to vote on it. I'm really sorry.
Thanks, Madeline. That's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Rysat.
Refuse.
Councillor White.
Approve.
Councillor Nasrin Ali.
Refuse.
Councillor Curley.
Abstain. So I make that 7 for, 3 abstentions and 3 against. Is that what you make it?
Yes, Chair.
Andrew?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, colleagues, for that. The next item on the agenda is item number 6, and this is this side, the land that's bounded by Ashton Canal, Great Hancourt Street, Monday Street, and Pollard Street. We have got Councillor Taylor to speak to us on this one, but before that, I will invite the officers to introduce it. So, Mr. Roscoe.
Thank you, Chair. We've received 10 further letters of support and 3 further letters of objection, which raise similar issues to those set out in the main report. One objector raises issues of the impact of sunlight and daylight on the hat box and on Milner's Wharf, as set out in the report, and references additional impact of Bowler's Yard. The letter also refers to the presence of a newt within 500 metres of the site, although the ecology unit have not raised this as an issue. The impact on Hatbox and Milner's Wharf he believes that the impact on Hatbox and Milner's Wharf would impact on individuals' human rights. Councillor Majid Dar supports the concerns of local residents and the impact of the scheme on the local environment. Whilst new development is needed, this feels excessive and over-indulgent. We've had a formal response from HS2 who were consulted on the application. They have no objections to the scheme, subject to additional detailed conditions about the implementation of the scheme, and additional conditions would be recommended if members were to support approval of the scheme, Chair.
Thanks very much, Dave. Thank you. Can I now see, we'll follow our guide on this. So do we have an objector? I think we do. Alan Good, Mr. Good.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to draw the committee's attention to Spatial Principle 6 of the core strategy, which states clearly, the council should provide networks of high quality green infrastructure, which includes networks of urban green space. The application details landscaping, but the amount of usable green space actually decreases significantly, and this is not compensated elsewhere. So to approve this planning application would be to violate the core strategy in itself. We are told the council doesn't engage in sweetheart deals with developers. Well, in 2018, New Islington Green was valued at £2.38 million. This is a 4.5 acre site. While the year before, the council spent £37 million buying back the central retail park, 10.5 acres. This is 7 times more per acre. We hear often the council is cash strapped, and I have great sympathy for this. Why then was a cut price deal done on open public green space in the middle of a climate crisis to build offices over every section of the green during a pandemic when people are moving to working from home? Council has approved over 6 million square feet of office space over the last few years, with 5 million more in spatial frameworks. You actually lose nothing by waiting to see what the medium-term impact this all has on working culture moving forward. There are logistical problems. Servicing at night between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. in a residential area is not on. The report relies on 3,000 workers apparently travelling by tram. There isn't capacity. The HS2 works cut the line from Piccadilly for an extended period of time as well. There is illegal parking and pavement parking in residential areas near the site. I think this development will make that worse. 600 cyclists are supposed to cycle to the site every day, but no cycle infrastructure has been included on Great Ancoats Street itself. The canals are narrow and are in and of itself no substitute to this. But I'd like to go further and ask candidly to the committee what proportion of consultation feedback needs to be objections for the committee to reject it. Because if this application is approved, then apparently 94% objection of nearly 600 residents isn't good enough. The ERF saw similar opposition from residents, but this was ignored by the executive. I've had over 700 residents contact me directly on this issue. One resident, Natasha, told me this: I, like many other leaseholders in New Islington, am trapped in a dangerously heavy flat next to the green. I face risk of fire and being bankrupted by remediation bills. The green space is desperately needed to keep me afloat during these devastating times. I feel like I'm being robbed of everything I hold dear. First it was my safety, then my money and my home, and now the one thing that drew me here. 7 apartment blocks line New Islington Green that have unsafe cladding. The council needs to stop looking both ways on public engagement and the climate crisis. We are told this council cares what residents think, but time after time they are ignored. We are told the council cares about protecting and expanding green infrastructure, but then of all the brownfield sites, this public green space is flogged off to developers. Today, however, the committee has the opportunity to show people in this community, residents like Natasha, that they understand the benefits of open green space. I think when you whittle the issues down, the question actually facing members of the planning committee is this: do you adapt to the climate crisis and a changing working landscape? Do you start listening to residents? Or is it going to be business as usual, toe the party line? I urge the committee to make the right choice. From the financial, logistical and environmental arguments I have outlined, please reject this planning application today. Show people that consultation works and give people faith in the planning process. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much indeed, Mr. Good. Thank you for that. Do we have the developer or the applicant or indeed an agent on their behalf? I think we do. We have Jacob Loftus. Mr. Loftus.
Good afternoon, Chair, councillors and the entire New Islington community. Since the outset of this project, we have engaged extensively with the community to help guide and inform our thinking. We have held multiple virtual consultation sessions, engaging with over 500 local residents, as well as holding one-on-one sessions with local schools, community groups, and grassroots charities. The importance of providing best-in-class, community-focused, public green space is the vital component of this project, and that is why it sits at the very heart of our proposals. Up until 2012, this site was entirely inaccessible brownfield land with no public access. And whilst it has been identified as a development site by the City Council since 1999, we fully acknowledge that for the last 7 years, the community have benefited greatly from this green space, and we want to ensure that continues. Accordingly, the entirety of our design has been developed around our desire to deliver a fantastic 2-acre public green space back on the site, one that supports the needs of the local community and most importantly addresses some of the issues that currently face the site today, particularly those around safety, antisocial behaviour and the lack of inclusive access for disabled people and families with prams. Our green spaces, which equate to the equivalent of approximately 8 five-a-side football pitches, will include a canal-side park, over 300 metres of canal-side green walkways, and a new public green town square. We will be investing £5 million into this public space, entirely privately funded, which will see over 55 new trees planted, a new children's play space created, and a series of new pathways enabling full disabled public access. The spaces will be fully publicly accessible 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The development itself will deliver a new SME business hub for East Manchester, designed to provide an exemplary model for the post-COVID workspace. The campus will deliver inspiring working environments that enable small businesses to grow and thrive. With an emphasis on a healthy and sustainable workplace, the buildings will operate on an entirely zero carbon basis. The campus will be entirely car-free with 550 cycle spaces and feature things like openable windows and a range of amenity spaces to ensure that this is exactly the profile of space that businesses need and want in a post-COVID working environment. Most importantly, a range of space typologies will ensure the campus offers solutions for all business sizes at a very considerable discount to the city centre. Once completed, the development will bring over 3,500 jobs to East Manchester and support approximately 200 small businesses. The economic value of this project is substantial. Over £165 million of gross value will be added to Manchester's economy every year. During the construction period, a further 800 jobs will be created, delivering an additional £112 million of gross value. Now, whilst these figures sound impressive, we must ensure that it's this local economy that sees direct benefit from this scheme beyond just the green space provided. As such, we have committed to an unprecedented community and social impact programme as part of this application, which will ensure over £8 million of social impact value goes directly into this local community over the first 5 years of the project alone. Our programme will deliver 75 mentorships for students from local schools every single year. 40 local graduates will be given internships. 15 apprenticeships will be placed within the campus every year. 25 local people will be helped back into work, and 25 free workspaces will be provided to local residents who are looking to start new businesses every single year. This will be delivered in partnerships we've already created with local organisations such as the East Manchester Academy, Yes Manchester, STEM Learning, and 1 Million Mentors. We believe that this project has the potential to be transformative for East Manchester, helping to power Manchester's COVID recovery and contributing to a further levelling up of our country's economy. It will deliver an unprecedented economic and social value, most importantly, alongside delivering 2 acres of exceptional quality public green space for the local community. I'd be delighted to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Mr. Loftus. Thanks for that. Now I'm going to call on Councillor Emma Taylor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for providing me with the opportunity to add to my written objection and to address the committee today. Committee members will be well aware of the high level of interest in this planning application, and as local councillors, myself, Councillor Dart and Councillor Battle have received lots of correspondence from residents across Ancoats and New Islington who have raised their concerns with us over the last few months. Firstly, I'd like to thank General Projects for their high levels of engagement with local councillors and for listening to our concerns during the consultation and planning process. However, it is my duty as a local representative to voice the concerns of my residents who have asked me not to support this application. The main concern raised by local residents is that this development will take away space from the local area, which people use for leisure and recreation. And this is the main point that I will be focusing on today. This space serves a large number of apartment buildings, which makes up a substantial part of the Ancoats and New Islington neighbourhood, many of which do not have balconies or any outdoor space. The local community value this open space, especially for their health and well-being. And if we have learned anything during 2020, it is how much we value our open spaces and environment. As local councillor, I would like to see Ancoats at the forefront and leading the way with the Manchester Green and Blue infrastructure strategy. As members of the committee will know, I usually welcome the creation of jobs and investment into Ancoats and Beswick, and I'm grateful for general projects for their social value and impact commitments. As noted in my written objection, many residents are not opposed to development and understand the importance of kickstarting the city's economic recovery in the aftermath of COVID-19. However, all of this investment must not be at the expense of the local community's health and well-being, and I am worried the impact that this application may have on my residents' living conditions, especially with the removal of this area of open space. Local residents appreciate the idea of maintained green spaces that have been earmarked as part of this development, but the overwhelming majority believe that the spaces proposed are too small for the local community to use, and this is not acceptable for my local residents. With all of this in mind, I would ask the committee to take on board my concerns and that of the communities of Ancoats and New Islington who have spoken loudly during this process before making a decision on this application today. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Taylor. Thanks for that very comprehensive contribution. Thank you. Could I now call on Mr. Roscoe, please?
Chair, there's a few points that I need to respond to, although most of those issues are covered in the report. In terms of the core strategy, you need to look at the core strategy as a whole, not just individual components or individual policies within the core strategy. All the relevant policies of the core strategy are set out in the report, and as set out in the report, on balance, we believe that this scheme complies wholly with the core strategy when you take it as a totality. The green space has no status, never has had any status as green space, and it's been earmarked for development for some considerable time. And what's coming forward now is wholly consistent with a long-term vision for this site as part of New Islington and East Manchester. The next point is quite important. The cost of the land isn't a planning issue. That is not a material planning issue and shouldn't weigh at all in the members' considerations, although members will be aware that the council has a legal duty to achieve best value for its land and its assets, but it's not a material matter in the consideration of this planning application. In terms of the need for office space, the council has established an economic recovery plan and the delivery of infrastructure, new investment, the creation of new workplaces and new homes is an absolutely essential ingredient of that. It's an essential component. There is a business sounding board which has been established, led and run by businesses, and it's a cross-sector of businesses in the city, and the majority of those businesses believe that they and their staff want to be back working in the city centre as soon as possible, and there's been an acknowledged shortage of good quality office space in Manchester, and there's a belief in the industry, in the investment community, in the development community, that more space is needed in Manchester. And indeed, people may have read very recently that at Noma, a speculative office building of 200,000 square feet has recently commenced on site. In terms of transport, this is a very sustainable location. It's not just a tram stop. It's within walking distance for many thousands of people. It's very close to Piccadilly's train station. And the absence of a cycle route on Great Ancoats Street doesn't stop people getting to the city centre. It doesn't stop cyclists getting to other nearby areas in Ancoats. So I don't believe that the argument that simply because there isn't a cycle route on Great Ancoats Street, this site isn't accessible by cyclists. Post-pandemic, post-COVID, I think Manchester will probably need jobs more than it needs anything else, quite frankly. You read the unemployment statistics and they're quite frightening. This job offers a significant amount, this proposal offers a significant amount of jobs during construction, over 1,200 jobs during the construction period, and many thousands of jobs once in operation, Chair.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for that. Councillor, I think, let me see who we've got speaking now. I think we actually can go straight now to the members of the committee. I'm looking at the screen, see if there's anyone in the chamber wants to speak. Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, obviously it's a very comprehensive report on a large site and a very detailed application. My comment was a couple of comments really. Was obviously there's a number of blocks being placed on this site, and I think we all welcome the jobs that the site could potentially create if it's approved, and the investment into this part of East Manchester. However, my concern is the spacing between the blocks and the public green space. It feels like the balance is just too much towards the buildings and not enough green space and public space in between. My other comment was regarding the Metrolink stop that's obviously there, which does help the site be sustainable. And I do note in the report there are some comments regarding the design of the area around the Metrolink stop. But is there any detailed condition? You know, obviously at Castlefield there's a very green Metrolink stop that's very welcome in that part of the city centre. Is there any plans to do something similar to the new Islington stop to, you know, increase the green cover around the actual tram stop itself, as well as the surrounding area? Thank you.
Mr. Roscoe.
Clearly, it's always a matter of judgment about how much is enough, and you know, what we have on here is there's about a third of the site that's being given over to green space and open space. I suspect there aren't too many developments in similar locations that have such an extensive provision of space. I mean, what this scheme does, at the moment, it's very difficult for people to interface with the canal because there's a canal wall along all of the edge. What this scheme will do is open up that area, which will benefit not just this side of the canal, but provide amenity for the other side of the canal as well. And you know, as we've heard, a significant central green space. I mean, it will be a major resource for the community, and it will be a major resource for the development. I'm not aware of another scheme providing such extensive open space in a location such as this. In terms of the future of Metrolink, we're not quite sure what that means at the moment. Obviously, the tram runs through the site. I think the HS2 comments allude to the fact that there might be some changes to Metrolink as part of HS2. If there are, I'm sure that this developer and probably this organisation will be putting as much pressure as it can through the implementation process for Metrolink to ensure that it sort of matches the quality that you get elsewhere in high quality, high profile areas. I agree that what's been done at Castlefield is great, and if that could be rolled out here, I can see that it will get support from within this organisation. Whether that's deliverable or not, I don't know, but I'm sure we'll be happy to pick that up as part of that process.
Thanks very much, Dave. Thanks for that. Councillor Lovesey.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, clearly with this kind of open space that's been left on what is essentially a brownfield site, we do face a lot of problems as a local authority and as councillors and as local councillors in engaging with our local communities to enable us to have a clear discussion about how this kind of area can be used. In my own view, and I'm someone who objects to so many sites in the city centre because of the lack of incorporating what I see as really anything like adequate public space, this looks like, you know, an unusual development in that it does incorporate significant amount of public space, and quite a large number. I think it's 55 new trees in addition to 17 that are going to be replanted. It's a site alongside a canal, and with opening up an area alongside the canal, which also looks to me as though that will be of real interest to and a real resource to families, to older people, and in many ways, I'm therefore minded to support this scheme, though I can understand why people have got used to having this green space, and particularly in this current period of the pandemic, do feel upset and concerned that they're losing something they've got used to. However, there are some questions that have been raised, which I didn't find were answered in the report, and so I'd just like to raise them now in committee. On page 51, residents raised the issue about whether the access points and therefore the pathways that are being established across the site really are as useful and as well thought through as they could be in terms of access for residents coming from a number of the local residential buildings around immediately around the site. I didn't see a response to that. And then on page 53, there's 2 points. The first one is about Foundry Green, and an argument that really the way that's been conceived in terms of the buildings alongside it will limit daylight, sunlight, and therefore limit its usefulness really as a public realm area. So, you know, have there been measurements, and could we have a little bit of information on that? And then there's the issue raised by Milliners Wharf and Hatbox about the access road that they make use of, and the fact that that will now become very congested. So those were issues which I didn't really see addressed in the report, and I'd be grateful if officers could give some response to them.
Thanks, Councillor Lopsey. Dave.
In response to the first point about the access routes, I mean, when you look at development sites like this, it's a balance, isn't it? You're looking at creating open space, linkages, new pedestrian routes, sensible building plots that are deliverable, and integration with the local community. And what's being looked at here is, you know, placing buildings essentially within an apartment setting, which have routes between them. You know, wherever you put a route, someone will like it and somebody won't like it. Quite, I mean, but you can't deliver on every single outcome, and because a route doesn't necessarily face somebody's building entrance, it doesn't mean that route isn't accessible to them. It might not be the most direct, but there are still sufficient routes into this site to allow the community and other users to get into and enjoy the space. Is a complete link along the canal, and there are routes in off Pollard Street, and there are routes in off Great Ancoat Street, and from the north. In terms of the open spaces, we've tested sunlight and daylight to the open spaces as part of the sunlight and daylighting assessment, and we believe that those spaces will be lit adequately during the months when sun's available to the spaces. In terms of Milner's Wharf and Hatbox, I mean, we're going to lose car parking spaces on the site. We're losing 80 car parking spaces from the site, and it's a car-free development. So it's difficult to see how that route's going to get more congested. There will be servicing vehicles on the site, obviously, but I don't think that will be significant, and to the extent that it would warrant refusal of the application.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Dave. I'm just looking on the screen. I don't have anyone. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. After reading the application and looking at the neighbouring properties that may impact, I'm looking at their actual VSC targets, and quite frankly I'm a little bit concerned because it's already stated how much they don't have. So I'm just wondering, in relation to their VSC, how much of these buildings will have further impact on already properties that have limited VSC lighting now. We haven't really got that full information in this report. You've mentioned it briefly, but when I look into the reports regarding what other ones have got, it doesn't really give me that impact of how that's going to affect those buildings. Can you please clarify?
Thanks, Councillor Hitchin, for that. Dave?
I mean, VSC is vertical sky component. I mean, that's the amount of sky you can see when you look out from your window, basically. That's what we have. And what we have at the moment is we have properties that have an unusually high level of VSC because they're looking out over a site that's clear. There are no obstructions to them. It's a flat site. All it's got on it is grass and a tram stop. So people's ability to see the sky, the vertical sky component, is probably unusually high in this instance. Those who don't presently benefit from good vertical sky component is because either their own windows are already recessed and therefore they lose visibility of the sky, or there's a balcony that overhangs their window. So there are circumstances that are unusual on both sides. One is that they're unusually high because there's no buildings on the site, and other people have bought accommodation where the windows are deeply recessed. When you look at developments in these areas, you have to acknowledge and accept, and the BRE standards set this out very clearly, that you cannot expect to achieve BRE standards are essentially standards that are set out for residential areas where you've got 20 metres between flats and you're looking at two-storey buildings. So the VSC standard in that respect isn't really relevant to the consideration of this application, but there isn't another standard, so that's what people use. So it's not unusual for VSC to be inhibited to a greater degree than one would expect in a densely developed area like this, and it's something that's experienced in the rest of the city centre. However you describe these things, whether it's NSL, which is no skyline, VSC, vertical sky component, what we're talking about is people's amenity, basically, and people's amenity will be affected by this. There's no point pretending that it won't be affected. It will be, because they're looking out over a cleared site. We don't believe, though, that the impact on that amenity in terms of daylight and sunlight is unusual in this kind of context. It's not unusual for the city centre. It won't be unusual for these parts of New Islington. It won't be unusual for Ancoats, and we believe that they're acceptable in this context and wouldn't justify refusal of a plan application.
Chair,
thanks for that.
He's not answered my question. I'd asked what would the detrimental, how much would they lose on those neighbouring buildings? Because in the report it clearly states what they've got now, and with the enhancement, if this was to be approved, how much of that would actually be mitigated on there? So you haven't actually given me a figure, because in the report it clearly states what they've got. In here I can't find out what their loss would be for future if the buildings if planning was granted.
Sorry, Chair, it is all in the report. If you read through the report, it's all in there.
Is there a particular bit, Dave, you want to reference?
There's a whole section on sunlight and daylight.
You know the bit about loss rather than gain? What does that mean? What does it say?
Sorry, say again.
June seemed to be talking about how much is lost. Is there any reference? How is that measured?
Yes. No,
thanks, Dave.
Chair, it's page 101 onwards. It's page 101 through to page 101 through to page 110.
Chair, I've been referencing from page 128 upwards, which actually has all of the VSCs in it and to each building, and it stipulates how much, like 34% on the Quantum apartment doesn't have VSC. And so this is why I'm asking the question, what would the effect of that be on those particular buildings? There's nothing in here that can actually elude me to say, is this going to add another 10% onto that building? That's what I'm after, and that's not what I can see in this report.
Dave?
Could you tell me which page you're looking at?
A few numbers of pages down, so I've wrote quite a few on them. So, for instance, if I go on to this, if you give me 1 second, I'll get that back to you.
Thanks. I'll call Yasmin Dar, Councillor Yasmin Dar, and then I'll get Councillor Paul Andrews. Councillor Dar.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to put my voice to obviously welcoming all types of investment, development and creation of jobs in the city and in the area. But on this occasion, I also recognise the concerns that the local councillors have raised, as well as a resident, in regards to overdevelopment and reduction of green space. So I probably will not be supporting this application.
Thanks, Councillor Dar. Thank you for that. Councillor Paul Andrews.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the late representations, and one of the things in the late representations from the Director is that condition 26 shall be omitted from the list of the relevant planning commissions. When I actually look at what condition 26 is, it's actually about acoustically insulating. So I'm just curious as to why we're dropping condition 26. And while I'm on the question of just some clarifications, at the beginning of the debate, Mr. Roscoe actually talked about HS2 and maybe some conditions being added to it, but I didn't get the opportunity to write down what conditions we're actually talking about in regards to HS2, so I could do with some clarification on those two small points, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Andrews. Mr. Roscoe, please.
Yeah, condition 26 is one that was put on at the request of Metrolink originally, but they've now asked for it to be removed. They don't think it's necessary now, so that's why that was removed. It was a request from the Metrolink. In terms of HS2, what they're concerned about is future-proofing changes to the Metrolink system as a consequence of HS2. And what they want is, should this development proceed and should those changes being taken place at the same time, they want there to be coordination to ensure that both schemes can be implemented simultaneously without impacting on each other. It's very detailed technical stuff like that, yeah.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Andrews?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'm just curious if all members finished. How are we doing, Councillor Aitchen?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I'd actually wrote on page 132, but it's actually going forward from 110 onwards and even a little bit further back. And for instance, Autumn House has the VSE target, 67% do not reach that. Quantum Apartments, 66 currently achieve, but 34% do not achieve VSC targets. So I'll go on and on and on. So what I'm wondering, and that's the question, is the reason is why I'm bringing this, is I would like to know what the impact of that would be if this planning application was to go forward. What further impact would it have to their lighting that they've existently got already?
Dave.
Where people are adversely affected, their light levels would change, clearly. I mean, and there's a lot of people around this site whose light levels would change because at the moment their light levels are coming across a site that's got nothing on it, and in future there are going to be buildings on it. we don't believe that those changes, the fact that it's going to be changed doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be noticeable. You can have quite a significant change to the VSC and to NSL without it being noticeable to those residents. So that when something has a pass, that means that the changes in light level won't be noticeable. Where it exceeds the pass level or doesn't achieve the pass level, then that change will be noticeable to residents. And there is no doubt that there will be changes around this site that will be noticeable to residents. But that's the same for virtually every development in and around the city centre and in and around this area. And we don't believe that those changes, which is a very technical analysis, we don't believe that those changes are so significant that you would, if you were to refuse the application, you couldn't refuse them on that basis. It would not be sustainable or substantiated to refuse on that basis.
Thanks very much. Councillor Hitchin.
Chair, thank you. Yeah, I just want to come back because I take on what you've just said as an officer, but again, it was just, I would have liked to have had the information to hand to say they would lose 15% or 15% more of their natural light if this building was to go there. It's that information, it doesn't marry. I'd just like to see those two figures, and I couldn't see those impact. You say it will have an impact, but it won't be materialistically an impact on that. So that's the reason why I brought it.
Yes.
Can I just clarify? I didn't say it wouldn't. I didn't say the difference wouldn't be material. There will be changes to people's daylight and there will be changes to people's sunlight, but they are within tolerances that we believe are acceptable in this context. So I'm not saying it's. I'm not sorry. What I'm saying is there will be noticeable changes.
Chair, can I then come back and say, does somebody need to have their light on all the time?
Very, very, very high. I don't believe there's a circumstance here where that will be the case as a result of this development.
Thanks for that. That was a detailed debate. Right. Now, are we anyone else? I'm just looking at my screen. I can't see anyone waving their hands. I have got Councillor Davis to speak, but I'm looking around. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I just want to say that this debate, which is essentially jobs and green space, is one that we've had before and we are going to have again. Jobs are absolutely vital to this city, and these green spaces, which have been green spaces for a while, having previously often had an industrial or linked to industry use, sit there for a long time because of the history of this city, the post-war part recovery, part depression, the deindustrialisation of the 80s, and the slow spread now of the economy boost that Manchester has seen over the past 25 years, now spreading further outside the immediate city centre. And these green spaces have become adopted by residents as their green space, their unofficial park. And I can totally sympathise with how they are viewed. It then becomes a very, very difficult situation to square, and I think it can only be squared by a much more active approach to management and provision of green space than we have. We have seen improvements recently, but I would contend that they are not quite enough, not just in the city centre, but in other areas as well. In the past, you used to have benefactors who would create green space in areas of terraced housing where people didn't have green space, and you'd get park land donated and so on by people who owned land and were benevolent in that way. We need to find more new ways of doing this. I would add that whilst it would be very welcome to see the new Islington tram stop tram stop begin to resemble the Castlefield Deansgate one. I live near Castlefield Deansgate one, and I would say that nobody regards that as a substitute for green space. Nobody goes and sits there and takes their dog for a walk there, or has a picnic, or goes and camp. I might try it one day, just say, I'm going to go and sit at Castlefield tram stop and have a nice sit in the sun. People would think I was mad. It isn't. It's nice to have, but it isn't a substitute. These are difficult decisions, I really accept, and I just wanted to make that statement and say that we really have got to get to the bottom of this and improve things, and that in the city centre and the areas just around it, the recent events and the lockdown, working from home, dislocation from your other friends and family have had really concentrated minds on this issue for city centre residents and apartment dwellers, and it is something that we have to address in the immediate future and the long-term future.
Thanks very much, Councillor Davis. Mr. Rusk.
I think just a couple of things, Chair, because I think the debate was winding up. One, we're building a 6-acre park just down the road from here at Mayfield, which is no distance away. So I mean that's going to be a major resource for the city centre and a major resource for, you know, people in Ancoats and New Islington. And secondly, I mean, if the council had acquired this site and just left it as a bomb site, it would have been highly criticised. We've not. We've treated it, we've landscaped it temporarily to make it look better. You know, if it had been left as a bomb site for the last 20 years, it would have been heavily criticised for not treating the site on a temporary basis. So it's obviously it's clearly a very difficult issue, but all the things that have been raised by the members hopefully are fully set out and addressed in the report.
Thanks for that. Thanks very much. Councillor Andrews.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In listening to the debate in its entirety, one of the things I can't do is I can't set aside the potential for the economic recovery and the jobs on this development site. So can I move, Chair, the officer's recommendations without condition 26 and any potential future conditions with HS2, which I'm presuming will be delegated to yourself and the director to actually discuss. But with those amendments, can I move the officer's recommendation, Chair?
Thanks, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Shawkat-Ali.
I was going to move the recommendation, but I will second the recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, colleagues. We've got that, Andrew. We've got the commentary from the mover and seconder. So I think, Andrew, if you wouldn't mind doing the roll call again, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Shawkat-Ali. Approve it. Councillor Andrews.
Approved, Chair.
Councillor Yasmin Dar.
Disagree.
Councillor Davis.
Approve.
Councillor Hitchin.
I do not agree. I think it's oversaturation of the actual site and loss of green space. So no, I don't agree with this application. I'm against. Thank you.
Councillor Kamal.
Approve.
Councillor Lovesey.
Approve.
Councillor Monaghan.
Approve.
Councillor Rysat.
Approve.
Councillor White.
Against.
Councillor Nasrin Ali. Take that as approved, Chair. Councillor Curley. Yes, Chair.
Right. Thanks. Thanks, colleagues. Thanks for that. Item 7 is the next item on our agenda, and this is land-bounded by... Sorry, Councillor Leach. Do apologise. Thanks. Sorry about that, John. Right. Item 7. So this is land-bounded by Great Juicy Street and Bell Street, Deansgate Ward. Officers to introduce Mr. Roscoe.
Apologies, Chair, there's quite a lengthy late representation. We've had an objection on behalf of, from Councillor Marcus Jones on behalf of the 3 Deansgate Ward members who say the site is tightly enclosed and the proposal is excessive and overbearing. It's too tall and doesn't meet the requirements of Core Strategy Policy EN2. It would affect previous regeneration on Mirabell Street, and the grey massing would rise above the heritage railway bridges and intrude on the setting of the cathedral and the conservation area. It would harm the setting of the heritage assets on Mirabell Street by setting them in a deep canyon where their architecture can't be enjoyed, and harm the setting of the railway bridges. This would increase crime and antisocial behaviour. It would cause considerable overlooking and would affect privacy to residents and neighbours. The rooftop amenity space would overlook a high number of apartments and would result in a loss of privacy. A grey-clad building in a neighbourhood of red brick would fail to enhance the heritage assets on Mirabell Street and the railway bridges. It would fundamentally alter the character of residences on Mirabell Street and Breslin Street, which are lower. The refuse space, service access and parking entrance opposite residential accommodation would harm their setting. The parcel office was undertaken in a complementary and respectful way. This would be harmed by the height, colour, palette, massing and lack of architectural detail of this proposal. The unpleasant grey mass would not reflect the red brick heritage assets. It places strain on local roads during construction and in occupation. Taxis, private hire vehicles, on-demand transport services, food, takeaway, delivery or online shopping deliveries would have a significant impact on Breslin Street and on Mirabell Street. Existing residents complain about congestion already. Breslin Street is not appropriate for service, maintenance, access and emergency routes. This would add to existing traffic problems on Mirabell Street. The proposal would harm pedestrian routes and the pedestrian environment on Breslin Street. It doesn't include social infrastructure or green space, and it does not provide affordable housing. Chair, we've also had 2 further letters of objection from local residents who raise similar issues and note that following the pandemic, more people will work from home and need light for mental health issues and to create a vibrant environment. The current proposal will block out light that they get to their homes. A flexible approach to new development does not mean that the concerns of neighbours in the immediate area should be ignored. Chair, the economic information that we normally provide with reports wasn't included in this one, but these are set out in the late representation. 23.9.2 million of investment, 92 construction jobs on site, 137 off site with a GVA of 22 million pounds. Chair, there will be 297 additional residents who will spend 2.3 million in the local economy, and that will support another 19 jobs. Chair, members should be aware that the committee granted permission in 2006 for a 17-storey building at the site, subject to a Section 106 agreement. That scheme was never implemented. In relation to this scheme, a lot has been said about it being a grey building, but the committee report explains that the main material is a blue brick and not grey. It's also been suggested that there is no contribution to affordable housing, whereas there is in fact a contribution of 614,000 with a reconciliation provision, and that's why the scheme is minded to approve, subject to a Section 106 agreement. And I'd just like to draw the committee's attention to an additional condition set out below in the late representation, condition 35, which requires the parking needs of any residents who are disabled to be met.
Thanks very much indeed. Thanks, Dave, for that. Now, we have an objector, so I'm going to call Sally in to speak, please. Robson Sally.
Chair, it's Rebecca Fairclough.
Oh, sorry about that. It is Rebecca, yes. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Sorry about that, Rebecca. You're next, thanks.
Not to worry. Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak today. There's obviously not enough time to run through all the concerns of residents on Mirabell Street, but I'll run through a few of the key concerns. I'd like to refer you to my original letter of objection dated the 26th of March 2019 as well. So I've lived on Mirabell Street for 8 years now. It's a very small and narrow street, which is mostly residential, save for some small local businesses in the arches in the viaduct at the end. I just wonder whether the people making the decisions have been to the street, seen how narrow it is and seen the characteristics of the street, because if they have, then I'd struggle to see how this application could be approved in its current form. The sorting office on Mirabell Street is a Grade 2 listed building, and I'm of the view that this hasn't been considered sufficiently when preparing the plans. I understand that Historic England haven't responded to this application, and that's a shame, but that doesn't mean that those considering the application should ignore this point. I've seen the response to the residents' objections by the applicant, and quite frankly, some of the responses are completely misleading, and you would only know that if you know the street like I do. On the listed building point, they state that, and quoting from their responses, they say that the new building will be sited to the rear of the former Royal Mail buildings and therefore form part of the backdrop to the building. That's not correct. The building is at the front of the building, so where the entrance is, that's the same street that where the proposed building will be. Their responses go on to say the Tempest scheme added a 20-storey tower within the immediate setting of the sorting office, and this presence does not detract from an appreciation of the listed building. So Tempest is at the end of Mirabell Street, and it's on a dual carriageway, so it's kind of out of the way compared to the proposed building. Furthermore, Tempest is mostly a red brick building, unlike this proposed development. The applicant also refers to Greengate and tries to draw parallels with that. But Greengate is on the opposite side of the river. So it's not in the same, it's not on the same street, and it's in a completely different area with completely different characteristics. Turning to the design of the building, you only have to walk down Mirabell Street to see that the development will stick out like a sore thumb. It will be an eyesore and is not in keeping with the other buildings in height, style, or materials. As far as the colour of the facade is concerned, every building on Mirabell Street is predominantly red brick. I understand, I've only just heard actually, that the brick, rather than being grey, is a blue grey, which just makes my concerns, even more so. In the applicant's response to our concerns about the colour of the building, they refer to Beaumont building being a dark grey. Well, that's a bit misleading because Beaumont building, which is my building, is red brick, but the extension on the top of it, which is 3 floors, that is a grey, but the base of it is predominantly red brick. So I'm concerned that the responses are misleading. Furthermore, the applicant goes on to say the building is therefore in keeping with the surrounding buildings. This simply isn't true, and one look at the street would tell you that. They also go on to accept and they seem to accept that as they go on to say, whilst also providing a contrasting structure within the skyline. So the building's either in keeping with the street or it provides a contrast. It can't be both. The applicant goes on to say several pre-applications were held with the local planning authority who showed preference for a contrasting material palette. And through these discussions, the grey palette was chosen. So I'm not quite sure what this is, but I find it astounding that if a contrasting palette would be acceptable on a road with a majority of red brick buildings, including a listed building. And again, now I've heard today that it's blue brick, then I have even more concerns. As far as the height is concerned, the applicant continues to refer to Tempest Tower and the Citygate building as comparisons to justify the height of the 13-storey section. But both these towers are further away. As I explained before about their locations. This development is going to be opposite the entrance to a red brick, low listed building. The comparisons that they make cannot be relied upon, and I ask that you attend the street to see this for yourself. As far as highway considerations are concerned, as I've said before, Mirabell Street is a narrow road and you can only just get 2 cars driving down it at the same time. If a lorry pulls up outside Domino's, which is at one end, then this narrows the road and it makes it very difficult for emergency vehicles to get past. You only have to look at the street to see how narrow it is and how often vehicles have to mount the pavement to get past the other vehicles or get access to one of the building's car parks. The road is also in a really poor state, with the tarmac having broken away, and you can see the old brick road underneath. This will only get worse with the addition of another building. Mirabell Street is already a bit of a nightmare for traffic. We have serious traffic concerns which have been exacerbated by Network Rail works last year, which took over 6 months. You've got the arena next door, which means that when something's done at the arena in a post-COVID world, you know, we have cars parked on both sides of the road, mounting the pavement. Some nights you can't even get in the building door because there's a car parked up there. That will only get worse, and especially if they remove the car park, which is the site for this development. The traffic on the road is only just manageable now, never mind by adding traffic for another 129 apartments, including taxis and 2 commercial units. So it's already dangerous as it stands, and it's wholly unsustainable, and it will be detrimental if the development goes ahead as planned. At one end of the street is a corner under the viaduct. It's already quite dangerous, and cars already turn the corner in the middle of the road, often having to, trying to avoid a collision. If you put an entrance to a new building right there, then this will be an accident waiting to happen. The applicant's application and responses say the following. The applicant said that the development will cause an extra 21 journeys in the morning and evening compared to the existing traffic. This is simply implausible. If I'm waiting for an Uber in the morning for like 5 minutes, almost 21 cars can go past at that one time. So I find it implausible that they say they rely upon these figures. They also say it's to be considered to be appropriate given the high accessibility of the site, capacity existing nearby car parks, and the fact that future residents will know parking is constrained when they seek to acquire the property. Even if people know there isn't parking, it doesn't stop them having vehicles. And furthermore, increasing traffic. There's Ubers, there's deliveries, especially after this year with the number of deliveries people are getting due to COVID. As I say, furthermore, the development is planned to be on a car park, which currently offers residents local business parking. And this will, of course, go. Considering the light issue...
Rebecca, I don't want to be
sorry.
rude or anything. I mean
That's fine. I've got one paragraph.
We normally have about 4 minutes. I'm told by the officers you've been going for 7. Will you start winding up, please? Thanks, Rebecca.
So just, we have concerns about the light to the buildings and to the apartments which it will face. They already have a lack of light from some angles, and this will obviously block off further light. And there's a concern about the commercial units which they want to put underneath the building, and which I draw your attention to Breslin Street, which is a single street which you can be accessed from both sides, but has a blind corner as well. So if you do approve this application, then we ask that you take the applicant up on their proposed conditions about opening hours for commercial units and the serving and refuse collection having to be from Great Juicy Street. But I implore you to not approve this application in its current form. Thank you for your time, and sorry for going over.
Thanks very much. Could I call John Cooper now, please? John.
Thanks, Chair. So this scheme is brought forward by Maryland Securities, working with the award-winning architects in Hodder and Partners and a highly experienced design team who have an extensive track record of delivering high-quality new homes across Manchester city centre. The low-grade surface car parking, the low-quality existing brick buildings and the poor quality of the public realm and street environment detract currently from this part of the city centre, and there can be no doubt that this site is urgently in need of regenerating. It's a site that has for some time been tucked away, but which will become increasingly pivotal as the city centre extends into the Great Juicy Street regeneration framework area, and as the new Manchester College campus is delivered, which will see thousands of students using this part of the city centre in the near future. In considering this application, and indeed any planning decision, consistency is very important, and we would therefore like to point out that the committee approved a taller 17-storey residential scheme on this site in 2007, which used the same materiality as the current proposals. The current proposals have been through extensive consultation, and a huge amount of work has been done to evidence and satisfy all of the issues that have been raised over what's been a lengthy determination period for this application. In short, though, I would like to respond to some of the points that have been raised and hopefully clarify 1 or 2 points. So the buildings are considerably lower than the aforementioned approved scheme, and respond contextually by stepping away from the adjacent residential buildings to the tallest element appropriately located adjacent to the viaduct. The choice and colour of materials and the choice of dark blue engineering brick is a contextual reference to the adjoining viaducts, which simultaneously provide a contrast to the nearby red brick buildings. The lighter aluminium cladding will provide contrast within the window reveals, and at the upper levels will provide a crown to the building, which is an important part of the architectural composition. This scheme is not in a conservation area, nor does it affect a conservation area. From a heritage point of view, the proposals have been independently assessed and will have no material impact on either the character of the nearest conservation areas or the setting of listed buildings. There are limited views into or out of the conservation area, and the setting of listed buildings at the moment includes the 20-storey Tempest Tower and the planned 20-storey plus buildings at Greengate. They form the setting to those buildings. The alternative views presented today do not appear to have been prepared on any professional assessment or any townscape analysis of the proposals. In terms of privacy, the relationship of the proposals to existing homes will be more generous in distance than the distance between existing residential properties on Mirabell Street as it stands today. In relation to sunlight and daylight, it's clear that placing a new building in a cleared site will inevitably create some impact. However, the majority, however, will not be adversely affected, and those that are, the light levels will be consistent with residential development across the city centre, areas like the Northern Quarter and Ancoats, where hundreds of people have enjoyed living for many years. The scheme will result in a net reduction in car parking, reducing car trips and assisting air quality in the city centre. This is a highly sustainable location with exceptional access to public transport. The access and servicing arrangements for the proposals have been agreed with highways. We do, however, recognise the increasing prevalence of deliveries, and this is an important management issue which we'll be very happy to pick up and respond to in detail through the residential management plan, which is secured by a planning condition. I'd just like to conclude by stressing the important role that the scheme can play in terms of sustainable economic recovery and a platform for future economic growth to support the city's ongoing regeneration. In the short term, the scheme will deliver £24 million in direct investment, creating 229 jobs through construction, and make a total contribution of £22.5 million GBA. Many of the jobs will be secured for Manchester residents, and there's a commitment to a local labour agreement as a condition of this consent. In the longer term, in addition to generating council tax and business rates, the 129 new homes will create an additional 2.3 million of expenditure in the local economy, support approximately 19 full-time equivalent jobs within local shops in Manchester. And as mentioned, the scheme will also provide a significant contribution towards affordable housing through a £614,000 contribution. In addition, the residents will support 54 public sector jobs across public administration, education and health. That's all, thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, John, for that. Now, John Davis, Councillor John Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check, are you happy for me to stay sitting here? Normally I'd be in a different part, but I'm presuming that today
stay where you are, Jane.
That doesn't matter. Right. So today I'm not speaking as a member of the committee, I'm speaking as the ward councillor representing residents and the interests of the 3 councillors in Deansgate ward. We first engaged with residents in March 2019. This application appeared in February, and that was prior to my membership of the planning committee. And we held a meeting in May with the local residents and confirmed our support. They were strongly opposed to this development. I've got, when you were a child, if family circumstances permitted, as it got towards Christmas, you had sort of one big ask and a few smaller ones, and you hoped you'd get the whole lot. Well, I've got one big ask and 3 smaller ones, and I really want the big one, but if I don't get the big one, then the 3 will absolutely be crucial. But what we would like to highlight is, first of all, the harm that this caused to residents. There is considerable overlooking and loss of privacy, both to its own future residents, who won't be terribly private, and to existing residents, especially because of the roof terrace. This isn't directly overlooking existing properties, looking more towards the arena, but the way that sound travels could well cause a nuisance in the evening. I noticed that there is, under condition 14, an intent to have an agreed limit of hours. I would hope that in drawing up those hours, there is some conversation with the residents who will be closest. That is quite an unusual approach, but I would hope that we would start doing it now because they will be impacted. Additionally, the current proposals suggest a refuse space, service access and parking opposite existing residential accommodation. In fact, there is a mention on, I think, Mirabell Street of there actually going to be bin store access gates. Now, I'd like you for a moment to imagine yourself sitting at home in your home, looking out of the window. I don't know what your view is like, but if you can mentally add bin store access gates and see whether that makes you smile or despair, you'll know what I like to think about that. So there would need to be some very, very careful conditions around that and very, very clear operations and maintenance so that those would be acceptable visually and in terms of noise and any other sense. Again, there is a condition on number 17 which relates to that, but again, I would hope that we could talk to residents if you are minded to approve this rather than minded to refuse, which of course is what the 3 Deansgate councillors would like you to do. There is also another issue which was raised just now by Rebecca, one of the long-term residents there, about vehicles mounting the pavement. And I wonder if you are not minded to refuse, if you would be willing to add a condition about adding pavement bollards in order to prevent this when we get the extra traffic that this will undoubtedly bring. As well as the effect on residents, there is effect on the historic character of the area. When we're looking at heritage in the city, there are some heritage buildings which jump out at us, others which are hidden gems which bring a smile when you get towards them, and other areas which actually really require more time, more studied approach to understanding their heritage. We believe that this area is such of those. The red brick appearance of the neighbouring villages is important, and the proposal fails to enhance those heritage assets. It's an ugly grey building. Some would call it a carbon bubble. It has unattractive grey cladding, which is out of kilter with the red brick, as has been said. When you are viewing the Tempest Tower, when constructed, was clad in significant red brick to protect the local character, which this proposal disregards. The former parcel office, which is opposite the development, is a heritage asset in and of itself. Years of sensitive regen efforts would be undone and harmed by the proposed development, severely detracting from the setting of these heritage assets. The core strategies policy are very clear that we should expect buildings in heritage areas to be of high quality. This area near the arena might not immediately jump into your mind as a heritage area, but it is. The railways, the old buildings there, and then as we come across towards Chetham School, towards the cathedral, we are moving towards an area which is about to see considerable regeneration as a heritage visitor and memorial area. This grey building would intrude into that view, and I would hope that you would be able to support the residents, support the heritage of this city, and send this back for a more considered, relevant approach, avoiding the grey cladding, the grey views, and the grey feelings which this building will bring to existing residents who've been there for some considerable time. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Davis. Mr Roscoe, please. Sorry, John, you have to leave, so...
I have to leave
Oh,
now.
sorry, John has, yeah. Oh, I thought you said John, yeah. You're leaving, John, aren't you? Yeah, yes, please, John, yeah. I thought you were on your way, John. I should have given you a chance, really.
Is that because I'm normally on this committee?
Yes. When John disappears, Dave, if you pick up, please.
Thanks, Chair. When I was a kid, all I got was an orange. Just to respond to the 3 points from Councillor Davis. Yes, the roof terrace would be carefully controlled by a condition. We are aware of members' concerns about that, and hopefully condition number 14 would allow us to address that. In terms of the bin store access gates, I mean, sites in the city centre have got to have an area where servicing takes place. Not everything can be a front door. If this were to be put on Breslin Street, that would probably cause, if the servicing was on Breslin Street, I suspect that would cause problems because of the proximity of the bend. So I don't think there's much alternative other than to have the servicing from Mirabell Street. But there is a condition that will require that to be managed properly, and bins will only be brought out an hour before the collection time, and they won't be left out afterwards. So the bins will be on and off the streets fairly quickly. And the condition will deal with that. In terms of vehicles mounting the pavement, there will be a condition on this application about repaving the footways around the site. I'd be very happy to add to that condition requirement that to include bollards to stop the mounting of the pavement in this area. Just in terms of the other issues that have been raised, there's been reference to Tempest being on the ring road, which it clearly is. But this site also fronts onto Great Ducey Street, which is a major route into and through the city centre. And as Mr Cooper pointed out, it's a site that does detract considerably from this area at the moment. It is, I would say, environmentally very poor. It clearly is a development site, and this committee has previously approved development. So this is clearly a site where development needs to take place, and this committee has previously approved an application that is at least 3 stories bigger than what is being considered today, and obviously that must carry some weight. That is a material consideration. The issues in relation to heritage are clearly set out in the report. There's a big chunk in the report about heritage. Obviously this area has no status as a heritage area, it's not in a conservation area, but there are listed buildings nearby, and those are clearly identified in the committee report. But respecting heritage doesn't mean trying to copy it. You walk around the city centre, you look at the town hall, sandstone building, there are brick buildings and buildings of other materials around the town hall that do not detract from it. So just because you've got a listed building that's red brick, it doesn't mean every building around it has to be red brick. What we need to focus on is the quality of that building and whether it is appropriate for that site. We believe that previous decisions that have been taken by the committee in relation to the scale of development on this site and the fact that this is a development site mean that the general scale and form of the building is acceptable. And as the guy who spoke in favour of the scheme said, this has been produced by one of Manchester's foremost architects. And whilst people might not like the appearance of the scheme, it is a well-detailed scheme. It is well put together architecturally. It is a very good piece of architecture. And just the last thing I need to say, I think is that it's a blue brick. It's not a grey building. It is a blue brick.
Thanks very much indeed, Mr. Ascot. Councillor Leach.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions and then 1 or 2 comments as well. I was just interested to know what the Section 106, the proposed Section 106 agreement was in 2007 that obviously wasn't followed through with. I also wanted to query, I think I heard it right, where the contribution towards affordable housing sounded like it was 614,000, whereas in the report it says 615,000. And what was the third question? I'll come back to the third question because I can't remember what it was now. In terms of my comments, I thought Rebecca, the objector, laid out very clearly some of the problems that will arise with a development of this size, and some of the issues surrounding access and waste collection and things like that. It would appear that one of the suggestions is to add a condition about bollards to stop pavement parking. So my third question was whether or not, if bollards were introduced as a measure to stop pavement parking, whether that would then have a negative impact in terms of blocking access. If vehicles that were parked up were not on the pavement, would it then just cause different problems of restricting access and exit? So I actually think that the objector made a very strong case that this is an overdevelopment of the site. It sounds as though the application back in 2007 was an extraordinary overdevelopment of the site if a 17-storey building was approved back in 2007. It seems to me that this is still an overdevelopment at this height. But my biggest objection to this is in relation to affordable housing. The case that the report confirms that a contribution to off-site affordable housing, either 614,000 or 615,000, would be provided by this development. But actually no case is made as to why there can't be a 20% affordable housing in whatever development is actually going to come forward on site. And I think I may be a bit of a broken record in relation to affordable housing in the city centre, but I see no justification for approving an application of this scale without a very significant proportion being for affordable housing. And the case is not made as to why that can't happen. So I would actually like to recommend that we are minded to refuse this application and for it to come back with reasons for refusal based around the lack of affordable housing on site and this being an overdevelopment of the site.
Thanks, Councillor Leach. Mr. Roscoe.
Thanks, Chair. I genuinely can't recall what the Section 106 agreement was for back in 2007, but we can find that out and get that for Councillor Leach if it would help him. Sorry if my memory's failed me again on when I said 614,000. If the report says 615,000, then it's definitely 615,000. In terms of the on-site affordable housing, I think the report explains that there's been a viability appraisal was submitted as part of the application. That's a public document which is available for anybody to scrutinise. That's been independently assessed on behalf of the council by an outside body, and the conclusion that they've come to is that the figure that's been provided, there was, I think when it was first submitted, there was no affordable housing, and I think through that process of that being independently assessed, a figure of 615,000 was identified. So the reason for that is because there's been a very detailed viability appraisal of the scheme, independently assessed, verified by our own officers in corporate property, and the figure of 615,000 is an agreeable and acceptable figure in light of the viability presented.
Thanks very much indeed, David. Thanks for that. Yes, John, yeah, come back.
Didn't get an answer on the other two questions.
The bollard thing, Dave, and the...
If people park illegally, it's always a problem, isn't it? Well, I mean, what one would hope that that people, I know you're going to say they won't, but I mean, if people cause a problem, then that's an obstruction, and there are remedies that can be taken against that.
Thanks for that. Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and on page 155 of the report, obviously it refers to a TRO, which might help with the previous point. But additionally in that section of the report, it identifies a green travel plan, a full travel plan, which will be developed. And obviously it will hopefully be a sustainable location next to lots of public transport. But the report does identify some bays for disabled people, and the highways are recommending at least one fast electronic vehicle charging point. And it's a query on this application and also future, with new diesel and petrol cars being banned from 2030, so in 9 years' time. Obviously, with the new developments now, what provision for electric charging points should be in developments? Is there a ratio that we advise? And maybe should we have more than one fast electric charging point on this development? Thank you.
Chair, what we normally do is build in resilience. So if there probably wouldn't be a need at the moment to make all the all the parking spaces EV accessible, but one would hope there'd be resilience in the scheme to ensure that moving forward, when diesel and petrol cars hopefully are phased out. Hopefully there won't be many cars at this development because it's such a sustainable location, but we need to ensure that there's sufficient resilience to make sure that all the parking spaces can be made EV usable moving forward.
Thanks for that, Dave. Thanks very much indeed. Councillor Hitchin.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise further on from Councillor White's representation what he's just stated, which is on disabled parking. There will be a disabled bay parking. However, in the late representation and what's been recommended by officers is that the local plan authority ensures that the parking needs of all disabled guests are met at a reasonable cost. But where would they be? Because if you've got somebody who wants to visit their family and there isn't enough parking spaces already, and there's already one person who's living in the building who has a disability, where would they be going? And how much is reasonable cost?
Well, reasonable would be a cost that people would have to pay in the city centre. And naturally, there are car parks. It would be at the closest car park. I mean, it can't be anywhere else. I mean, obviously we can't create road space and car park where there aren't car parks. This is clearly a development site, and it's one of those sites, and there are many sites like this in and around the city centre, especially in tight-knit areas. Northern quarters, an obvious example. The whole of the core in the city centre is another example, where essentially what we have to achieve is the best fit, because you're never going to get the perfect fit for everything. Whatever this site is developed for, there will be service and needs, and what we've got to make sure is that the road space and the sites are used effectively and efficiently to ensure that all those needs can be met. So the parking spaces that are made available to people who need them because they need access to a parking space if they have a disability, it will be the closest parking space that you can get, because it can't be anywhere else.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for that. Anyone else? Any other comments? I'm just looking at the screen, see if there's anyone I can see. Hey? Oh, I don't think he wanted to speak on this. Is that right? He doesn't. No, he's going to speak later on. Thanks. Thanks for that. Right, so we have the, if there's no, I can't see anyone else indicating. I'm looking on the screen as well as the chat. I don't see any hands or anything. So we need to move, therefore, to the recommendation. Did you? Yeah, Councillor Leach.
Just to clarify, Chair, I did suggest an alternative recommendation, but no one appears to have decided to second that.
Well, that's why I was given some time, Councillor Leach, to see if, because people heard you, and I was just waiting to see Councillor Paul Andrews.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm certainly not going to second you, Councillor Leach, but I think what needs to be done is I'd rather move the officer's recommendation for approval, mainly to approve, Chair, subject to whatever the section 106 is called these days. But I am curious as to the request from Councillor Davies in regards to pavement parking and what can be done to actually put a condition in which actually solves that. And if it does cause problems later on down the road, then that's something we'll have to deal with then. At this point in time, I think we should take seriously what Councillor Davies has said. So with that additional recommendation, Chair, I would support the officer's recommendation.
Mr. Roscoe, do you want to make any comments on that?
As I said at the time, there will be a condition about replacing the footways, and we're happy to include bollards as part of that, if that addresses Councillor Andrews. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Dave. That's really, really helpful. So we have a second for the recommendation.
Second.
I second the...
I think Councillor Watt has done it shortcut, but thanks all the same. Right, Andrew, we're voting here. I'm just wondering, was somebody, Councillor Lovesey, were you indicating you wanted to speak? I've just seen you waving.
Yes.
We've lost you, Councillor Lovesey.
Sorry, I didn't get that into the chat properly. I did feel that Councillor Joe Davies's points about strengthening the two conditions weren't really adequately taken up, and she wanted there definitely to be a commitment to further consultation with residents to take their views into account in terms of conditions 14 and 17, the noise and the bins. And I just thought I would like to see that, a strengthening, so that we are, I think we all worry about the need to engage effectively with our residents and have a proper dialogue and take their experience effectively into account.
Thanks, Councillor Lovesey. Thanks very much indeed for that. Mr. Roscoe.
Yeah, we're very conscious of those issues, which is what I've said to, which is what I said when I responded, all being well. The condition, I mean, it's not possible for us to consult residents on the discharge of conditions, but we understand those sensitivities, and as do colleagues in environmental health, who we will consult on the discharge of the condition regarding the roof terrace. The condition about the bin stores, I don't think that could be any stronger. It requires the bins to be put out at a certain time, which is a limited time before collection, and then to be taken back inside immediately afterwards. So I'm not really sure how much more we could do in terms of that condition. So hopefully members will be assured that we understand how concerned they are about these issues, and we will ensure that those are properly addressed through the conditions that are set out in the report.
Thanks very much indeed. Thanks for that, Mr. Roscoe. That's good. So I think we're ready now to move to the vote. I can't see anyone indicating. So Andrew, will you do the roll call again, please? Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Shaukat Ali.
Approve it.
Councillor Andrews.
Approved.
Councillor Yasmin Dar.
Disagree.
Councillor Hitchin.
Approve.
Councillor Kamal. Could you say that again, please, Councillor Kamal?
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Leach.
Against.
Councillor Lovesey.
On balance, I'm prepared to approve, yes. We've got the previous approval, haven't we, in 2007?
Councillor Monaghan.
Agree.
Councillor Rysat.
Approved.
Councillor White.
Approve.
Councillor Nazrin Ali.
Approve.
Councillor Curley. Nine, two, one, Chair.
Right. I think you've got that, haven't we, Andrew? We've got 2 against, 1 abstention.
Yeah.
And did we say 9-4? 9-4, yes. Thanks. Thanks for that. Excellent.
Chair, could we have a quick comfort break, please?
If you want a quick comfort break, shall we say we'll be back, how many minutes? 5, 10 minutes? Yeah,
Next
10
week,
minutes.
please.
Back onto the agenda, and number 8 is the Speaker's House, 39 Deansgate. So what I will do, I have a number of speakers here, but I'm going to start and ask Mr. Roscoe to introduce this. Dave.
Chair, there's nothing to add to the printed report. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Dave. Thanks for that. So we've got an objector. I think we have got an objector. Ros and Sally, over to you, please.
Okay, thanks again for letting me have this opportunity to remind the committee again about our objections. This isn't an appropriate building for this site due to its height and mass, its position in a conservation area, its impact on the nearby heritage assets, and its impact on nearby residents such as myself. Objections were sent from 13 individuals and the number 1 Deansgate Right to Manage company, which Sorry about that. Shall I start again?
Yes, please, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sorry. So thanks for letting me have this opportunity again to remind the committee about our objections. This isn't an appropriate building for this site due to its height and mass, its position in a conservation area, its impact on the nearby heritage assets, and its impact on nearby residents such as myself. To indicate the strength of opposition, objections were sent from 13 individuals and the number 1 Deansgate Right to Manage company, representing 43 households, over 100 people. So firstly, the impact on the heritage assets. Manchester's a reducing number of heritage assets, and we're privileged to live near 3 conservation areas. The low to mid-level height of the historic buildings and the cityscape has to date been protected, but the height and mass of this proposal will cause them comprehensive harm. The Council acknowledges there's an adverse impact on heritage views, so by definition is admitting it diminishes the value and appreciation of the adjacent heritage assets, assets which belong to all of us in Manchester. With regard to Deansgate, the proposal says it's restoring the original street line, but it will greatly impact the existing low to mid-level roof line, which critically comprises Barton Arcade. The Council's reference to permission for towers in the Ramada complex and at the southern end of Deansgate is irrelevant. These are not in conservation areas. The proposal for 39 Deansgate is an outlier and an anomaly. The Council also sets a dangerous precedent for other conservation areas by veering from its own tall buildings policy. So secondly, the impact on nearby residents. This proposal will have a direct and harmful effect on our lives through loss of residential amenity. The proposed height and mass means a loss of our privacy and light. Number 1 Deansgate is a unique, fully glazed residential building. The balconies are an extension of the living area for residents and are used for dining, as green areas, and for well-being and relaxation. They do not have blinds, therefore allow direct, uninterrupted views into our homes. If the proposal is built, all facing homes will be overlooked by every floor in the new commercial development, and it will be possible to look through balconies straight into all living accommodation, including bedrooms, which is contrary to what the proposal says. The purpose of a glazed building is to let light in. The proposed development will reduce the light, both by its shadow and by residents being forced to use their internal blinds for privacy, making homes significantly darker. The building will block out the sun for a great part of the day and take away existing skyscape, making use of residents' balconies significantly less attractive. Any heights comparison with number 1 Deansgate is irrelevant. The latter is outside the conservation areas and as a fully glazed building has a much less impactful sky print. Its proposed building be open 24/7, which is contrary to previous statements by the developer. Its stated use, and I quote, predominantly during office hours, can't be controlled, so our privacy will be compromised 24/7. The public benefits are premised on income from continuing office demand. It seems clear we're in a period of transition and uncertainty post-COVID. This is not the time to be building such a massive block without consideration of sustainability or well-being, and which may turn into an empty folly. Finally, the Council's own framework, SO6, seeks to ensure the city is inclusive and attractive to residents, workers, investors, and visitors. So if I take these stakeholders one by one, the investor is a global company whose commitment to our city is to maximise the return on their investment by building as big a building as physically possible. Workers and visitors contribute financially and socially, but leave at the end of their day or visit. Residents such as myself are here 24/7. We've made a strong personal commitment to Manchester, investing financially and socially, so playing a key role in the continuing vitalisation of the city. This proposal fails the test of SO6 for us in terms of our privacy, amenity, and its detrimental impact on our wider environment, including our heritage assets. For these reasons, and on behalf of my fellow objectors, we believe this tall and massive block is not the right building for this site. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Thanks for that. Now I'm going to call on Chris Senton. Chris.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Chris Sinton. I'm the planning agent representing the applicant, Kames Capital Property Income Fund. Following my address to committee last month, I wanted to take this opportunity to respond to some of the matters raised and to further reiterate the benefits that the scheme will generate. The proposals are the culmination of an extensive iterative design process. The applicant has worked closely with officers and other statutory consultees, including Historic England, to ensure that the proposals deliver a high-quality landmark building at this key gateway location, meeting an identified need for Grade A office space, preserving and enhancing the character, appearance of the surrounding area, and contributing to the city's post-COVID economic recovery. I would like to thank officers for their diligence in assessing the application and for the comprehensive committee report which details the careful consideration that has been given to all technical matters in reaching the positive recommendation. Given the importance of heritage considerations, Historic England were consulted early in the design process to ensure that heritage response formed a central part of the application. Historic England identified that the overall level of harm to heritage assets was considered to be less than substantial as defined in the NPPF. In line with paragraph 194 and 196 of the framework, clear and convincing justification has been provided with the planning application, with the proposal securing a number of public benefits that outweigh the potential harm. These include a significant investment into a key regeneration area in the city, the creation of an estimated 91 net direct and 36 net indirect construction jobs over the build period, with a local labour agreement to be secured for the construction phase to maximise local employment, the creation of 730 net full-time jobs once operational, additional local expenditure of circa 2 million annually, and the generation of approximately 2.3 million in business rates per year, and the creation of a highly sustainable building designed to BREEAM excellent standards, which will efficiently reuse as a brownfield site. The existing site comprises a poor quality office building of 9 stories, and it's against this context that any impact on overlooking and privacy should be considered. There are no prescribed separation distances between buildings within the city centre, where developments are, by their very nature, more dense. The smallest distance between the proposal and the nearest apartments at number 1 Deansgate is over 16 metres. This is entirely acceptable given its context. This is in keeping with recent approvals elsewhere in the city centre, where smaller separation distances have been considered acceptable. The crafted design of the building takes contextual references from its surroundings. As noted in the committee report, Shepherd Robson's convincing and well-considered approach to design, scale, architecture and appearance has resulted in a high-quality development that would make a positive contribution to the street scene. This will be further enhanced by the council's proposed reimagining of Deansgate, which will drastically improve the public realm around 39 and further encourage active travel in an already highly sustainable location. In regeneration terms, the endorsed Ramada SRF represents the final piece of the 1999 City Centre Renewal Area Master Plan. The proposals will be the first to come forward since the SRF was endorsed in May 2018 and have been designed in accordance with the principles as set out in the framework. The proposals will have a catalytic regeneration effect on this end of Deansgate and the wider city centre. Council's recently published Economic Recovery and Investment Plan clearly articulates the current economic challenges faced by the city as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and Brexit uncertainty. But it also provides a statement of confidence in a reinvigorated future for Manchester, which is able to play a leading role in levelling up the country's economy. The proposed scheme would boost flexible prime office stock in Manchester, for which there remains significant demand, and contributes to the city's recovery, securing investment and maintaining development momentum. This in turn will be critical to sustaining employment in construction and related sectors and their supply chains, and would contribute to bolstering the council's tax base moving forward. Should members be minded to approve the application in line with the officer's recommendation, it will send a clear message that Manchester supports regeneration proposals that secure high quality development in line with the council's adopted SRFs, is committed to creating employment opportunities, new jobs and investment in the city, and that post-pandemic the city is dedicated to its long-term sustainable recovery building on the successes secured over the past few decades. Taking this into consideration, it is respectfully request that members approve the application in line with officers' recommendations. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much indeed, Mr. Senton. Thank you. I'm going to call now on Councillor Johns.
Thank you, Chair. As a local councillor, I'm not opposed to development that contributes positively to our city, including on this site. However, I am resolutely opposed to development that has permanent negative impact on our neighbourhoods, our residents' quality of life, and our history. This particular application fails on those grounds. Throughout this application, I've been contacted by many residents who have expressed their clear opposition to this proposal and worked together on a community objection that I fully support. You heard from Rasheen at the last meeting, an active local resident, and have heard from her again today. I fully support what she has told you. You also heard from Councillor Jevons last month, who outlined many key objections in requesting a site visit, for which we are grateful that you agreed and undertook today. Because of the proposal's significant scale and massing, which provides for high levels of overlooking, loss of privacy, and loss of light, residents who have contacted me are in dismay at the impact that this application would have on them personally. The new building would be very close to their homes, and all floors on that side of number 1 Deansgate would suffer from overlooking. Residents would have no means to obtain privacy in their homes, which is a significant harm and unacceptable. Moreover, this proposal would majorly negatively impact nearby listed buildings and the St Anne's Square conservation area. There is a beautiful, eclectic and low-rise roofline on the west of St Anne's Square, made up of Grade 2 listed townhouses. St Anne's Church also sits within the conservation area, and the view out from it will be considerably disrupted with this overbearing development looming from behind those townhouses, kiboshing the square's historic look. Indeed, the applicant's own heritage statement acknowledges this, saying the proposal would introduce a dominant modern vertical element into a low-level building line, which is otherwise largely 18th century in character, which would be compromised. This square is crucial to our city's history. Indeed, Historic England say that the square is an important survival of the early historic character of this part of Manchester, and of planned squares of the Georgian period. I think there is no clear or convincing justification for the harm this development would cause to the square's setting. Today, you also saw and walked through the historic Barton Arcade with its unique glass dome roof that has provided visitors since Victorian times a moment to look upon a clear sky. This is a Grade 2 star listed Grand Victorian shopping arcade directly abutting this site. This proposal would completely disrupt its setting with the loss of magnificent views of the arcade's dome from outside and irreversibly changing the appreciation of the dome from within. I disagree with the argument that the applicant has put forward, that the dome was never intended to be seen looking southwards as a reason to allow the loss of a key view of heritage in our city. Many things that were never intended are crucial to our cultural history today. It is a beautiful view that you'll have appreciated today and that would be lost. This proposal would also provide for an ugly backdrop to the clock tower of the Royal Exchange Theatre when looking down Market Street. This is an iconic view of Manchester seen on many postcards and photos. Overall, Historic England expressed their concerns about the application on heritage grounds and remind us of the great weight that should be given to assets conservation, including harm to significance in the National Planning Policy Framework. I know today you have visited and will understand how this proposal will completely change the setting of heritage assets in our city centre that are enjoyed by our people. This would be an overbearing building, and I strongly disagree with the report's conclusions, which underplay the scale of the proposal throughout. In reality, this proposal provides for significant harm to the setting of some of Manchester's most well-known and culturally significant heritage assets, and I would urge the committee to refuse this application on those grounds and on the grounds of loss of residential amenity for residents in number 1 Deansgate. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much indeed, Councillor Johns. I'm going to ask David Roscoe now to say something about what's been said.
Chair, I think there were two main issues that came out of that. One was the impact on residents and their amenity. And then the second was the impact on heritage. It's inevitable that some of what I say now will be a repetition of what's in the report, because those issues are already fully addressed in the report, hopefully comprehensively and in a balanced way. I think it's important to acknowledge that number 1 Deansgate doesn't have any special status as a building. It's a tall glass building, and it's used, and it's full of people's homes, but it doesn't have any specific status other than that it's where people live. So it's not a listed building, it's not in a conservation area. There's been mention before of it being this bookend to the Hilton Tower at the end of Deansgate. There is no special status around that. What we need to consider as a committee are those amenity issues, the impact on that building, the impact on those residents in terms of noise, nuisance, daylight, sunlight, privacy, overlooking, etc. The report sets those out very clearly. I don't think there's anything unusual or different about the impacts this scheme will have on number 1 Deansgate and those residents than other schemes that this committee has considered before. In fact, I suspect many of the impacts here will be less than schemes that have been approved by committee before. There will be impacts on daylight, there will be impacts on sunlight. Inevitably, there will be impacts on views, but when you buy the property, you don't buy the view. That's a legal fact. When you buy that property, you don't buy that view. But the impacts that you'll get here will be no worse than those that people experience because of development near them elsewhere in the city centre and in areas like Ancoats, New Islington, etc. In terms of the impacts on heritage, it's important to acknowledge that number 1 Deansgate, even though it's not in a conservation area, impacts on heritage. Yeah. So when we do assessments of tall buildings, which we did, for instance, on Great Juicy Street, even though that building is not in a conservation area, you do assess the impact of that on the conservation area. So when you consider things like the Hilton Tower, you assess the impact of that on the conservation area. So the fact that number 1 Deansgate isn't in the conservation area doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact. It clearly has an impact, and this building will have an impact on the conservation area. What we've got to work out is whether those impacts are acceptable or not. It's significant to note that Historic England had no concern about the impact on the Grade 2 star listed Barton Arcade, and they didn't raise any impacts or concerns about the impact on the Tower of the Royal Exchange. The thing that did exercise English heritage most was the view across in a north-westerly direction from St Anne's Church over the two-star listed Georgian townhouses, and that's something that we did focus on. Those who came on the site visit today, we did look at that, and you can see the top of number 1 Deansgate from the St Anne's Square Conservation Area as we saw today. But if you stand in St Anne's Square Conservation Area and look south towards St Anne's Church, you can see the Hilton Tower behind it. But that doesn't diminish in any way, shape or form the quality or your understanding of St Anne's Church and its significance. If you stand in Albert Square and look north, you will see a tall building as a backdrop to buildings in Albert Square. If you stand in Albert Square and look south, you will see the Hilton Tower and the cluster of buildings that now form Great Jackson Street. So the fact that you can see backdrop buildings when you're in a conservation area doesn't mean that their impact on heritage is so damaging that you would resist or refuse planning permission. What we have to work out is what the level of harm is by that development, which in this case is manifestly less than substantial harm. It is not substantial harm, it is less than substantial harm. And then what we have to work out is whether the public benefits that the scheme delivers, which are significant, several thousand jobs will be delivered here. We would recreate a major part of the city centre. When you look at those public benefits, do those outweigh the harm? And that's a test that we have to assess in terms of those heritage impacts.
Thanks for that, Dave. It was interesting, the visit this morning, and we did get some stuff handed out Councillor Leach at the visit. I hope that you've managed to get a copy of that. Or it was the other one. Sorry, Councillor Leach, wrong one. Right, I see that Councillor White wants to speak.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. It was obviously very useful to go on the site visit this morning and to look at the site on the junction, very busy junction in the centre of Manchester, excuse me, and also to go into Barton Arcade and to look at the impact that the building potentially may have on the glass roof of the Victorian Arcade. I used to work in Barton Arcade for 5 years on the 3rd floor, and my desk on the 3rd floor would have looked out over where this building, if approved, would be. Also, we walked into St Anne's Square, which is part of the St Anne's Conservation Area, and saw the impact of this building on the Grade 1 listed St Anne's Church. Obviously, you've got the Royal Exchange, and you've got the Parsonage Gardens Conservation Area across the road. So it's a really unique setting in the city centre, a busy junction, and obviously development will need to take place at this junction, given that the developer believes that the current office is not fit for purpose. However, I do agree with Councillor John's summary that the impact on the heritage of this area and the listed buildings means that this building, due to its height and its overdevelopment and its massing and the way that it addresses the pavement, is not suitable. And also the local resident who articulated very well that the loss of residential amenity from the height of this building in this location on number 1 Deansgate, but also the other areas surrounding it. So I do think there is significant harm because of the massing and the scale on this corner plot, particularly on the heritage and the listed buildings. So I've been moving a motion to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor White. Thanks for that. Councillor Leach.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I wasn't able to make the site visit, but I did go and have a look at the site separately. But actually, I think the most interesting thing about this is that the impact is not necessarily so clear right at the site, but from distance. And I think the mocked up photos of the proposed development are very helpful in showing what this development would look like from the different angles. I accept the point made by officers in relation to the impact on the residents at number 1 Deansgate, and that it's accepted in, I think on page 216, that there is an impact on residents. It says it's acknowledged that there would be some impact on nearby residents, but it would not be so harmful as to warrant refusal of the application. Similarly, it's accepted that there is some impact on the Grade 2 listed townhouses. But on balance, the officers are suggesting that the benefits of this application outweigh the impact that it has on whether it's the townhouses, whether it is the residents at number 1 Deansgate. I would suggest, however, that there is a cumulative impact of this application where it may well be that individually the impact on the heritage or the impact on the residents is not enough to warrant a refusal. But in totality, when you put them together, I do think there is a very strong case to warrant refusal in this instance. I think the mock-up photos show very clearly the impact that this building will have. But I just want to add one extra thing. I did make this point at the meeting last month before it was decided to have a site visit. One of my biggest concerns about this proposed development is, I'm not questioning the quality of the development, but from distance, this development does not look to me to be a high quality design. I do think from distance, in these photos, the mocked up photos suggest that this would be more appropriate in 1970s East Berlin. than in 2020 Manchester. And if we're going to have a building of this size that could have this impact on the heritage, on local heritage sites, it should look significantly better than what is proposed here from distance, regardless of how good it looks up close. This looks terrible from distance and simply is not good enough if it's going to have this impact on heritage. So I would say, on balance, the cumulative impact, whether it be on the residents at number 1 Deansgate, whether it be on the impact that it has on the townhouses, the Grade 2 listed townhouses, or whether it be the actual design from distance with such a landmark building, it's simply not good enough for Manchester city centre. So I will certainly be either voting for the minded to refuse or voting against the application.
Thanks, Councillor Leach. Dave.
Just a couple of points. One is it's going to be difficult to argue a cumulative impact when all the individual impacts are probably acceptable. We'll have to see how the committee goes with that, but as the report sets out, all the impacts are not unusual. So it will be difficult to impact that. Things that are individually that harmful cumulatively are, but I mean that's a judgment for the committee to make. I've been to Berlin, and I don't recall seeing any buildings in East Berlin that have got the level of quality or detail or sophistication that are made out of anodised aluminium and seamless glazing such as this. So I do find it difficult to understand the comment about the reference to East Berlin. This is a very high quality scheme. I mean, you look on the distance views, you're looking at relatively small images of a very complicated and sophisticated scheme. And I suspect, I can only imagine that's not coming across, if it's coming across as a scheme that looks like it's from 1960s East Berlin.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for that. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Johns on this, and for 3 reasons. First of all, taking the corner of itself, a busy corner, a corner which is changing in nature because of changes to the traffic that can use the area, because of developments that will take place down towards and past the cathedral, and because of the impending redevelopment of the hotel on the diagonally opposite corner. I quite like the building, but I do think that it is too tall in that location, too dominant. It is only slightly taller, we're told, than the number 1 Deansgate. But number 1 Deansgate sits there very lightly. It's slender, it's sloped, and it's glass. And there is a gap between the podium that starts at ground floor level and the cantilevered piece above. It is not a solid block of height and mass that this development would be. Secondly, with the St Anne's Square and Barton Arcade issues, the comparison has been made between what you can see of number 1 Deansgate and particularly what you can see of the Beetham Tower from St Anne's Square. And yes, from St Anne's Square you can see the Beetham Tower. But further back along Cathedral Street, you can see the Beetham Tower as it sort of shrouds the tower of St Anne's Church. But the Beetham Tower is right at the other end of Deansgate. And so the comparison between a building that is at the far end of Deansgate with a building that is at the near end of Deansgate from the perspective of St Anne's, I don't think quite holds out. And the third reason is to do with the number 1 Deansgate itself. The planning officer is saying it's not special, it has no special status, and I admit that it doesn't. It just has the status of being people's homes, which for us as councillors, given that we are elected by the people in the ward to represent them, that is a high status in itself. It may not be material in planning directly and specifically in planning decisions, but it is at the heart of a lot of planning decisions because we are considering the effect on people, and this is people's homes. There are about 60 flats there, and that development led the regeneration of that area of the city. It was unique, it's iconic, it's effective. It was the building that was massively talked about before the Beetham Tower and before Deansgate Square. And it does have a status, so it has that triple status: one, in its appearance; two, in its role in regenerating the city there; and three, as people's homes. And if we're going to continue the success in this city of building homes in the city centre for people to live in and enjoy their lives in, we cannot be saying to the people who made that leap over 20 years ago or more, that you'll move in, you'll have a really nice building and nice surroundings for a long time, but just hang on a bit, because eventually we're going to chop down the building that's in front of you and build a huge one right there. I know you don't buy a view. Councillor Johns hasn't argued about the view. He's argued about overlooking and privacy. And the reality is that when that building was built, when that building was given planning permission, it was given planning permission with sort of semi-inside, semi-outside balconies with these louver things that create this space, which is used as a living space, but it was not given the means to erect blinds in any neat way. If anybody's put a blind up in there, it's not within the original design. Now, if we're going to want privacy for people, we should not, years ago, have been allowing that to happen, because those balconies are part of the living space effectively, and they are going to be overlooked. And if they're overlooked 24/7, then that's going to really damage the amenity of the people in that building. And this is about a message that we send out to the life of people in the city centre. It has to be sustainable over the long period of time, not just have a few nice years and then all sorts of stuff goes on around you. And realise the area has to be, that building has to be redeveloped. It's not very good. It was of its time and it does need replacing. But I think we need to look differently.
Thanks, Councillor Davies. Switch off your microphone, Jill. Thanks. Dave.
I think when I first spoke, I did acknowledge that the special status of this building was the fact that it was full of people's homes. I did actually acknowledge that. And I also said that what we have to consider as part of this application is the impacts on those homes in terms of people's privacy, overlooking daylight, sunlight, etc., etc. So I don't want anyone to think here that those issues haven't been properly considered, because they have been, and they're clearly set out in the report before members. In terms of number one, Deansgate being a light building, this is a light building. This is anodized. This is an anodized metal. It will be light and reflective. It will change. Its appearance will change in relation to the time of day, the weather conditions. I'm reluctant to say it will shimmer, which some people say these buildings do. It won't shimmer, but it is a high quality, lightweight material. This isn't a heavy masonry building. It's largely glazed and anodized aluminium. It will have a textural feel, and it will be reflected. There'll be a lot of life in the elevation. This isn't a heavy masonry building. So this is a relatively lightweight building, similar to number one Deansgate, although it's not wholly glazed. The impacts on the conservation area are all set out before you. They're not unusual. They are not unusual. The fact that this impacts on St Anne's Square conservation area doesn't mean that it's unacceptable. In every conservation area that we've got, you will see backdrop buildings. You see big backdrop buildings when you're in Albert Square. And you will see larger backdrop buildings when you're in St Anne's Square and other conservation areas. What we have to assess is whether the extent of that impact and whether the public benefits of the scheme outweigh that level of harm. the public benefits of this scheme are significant and they are set out in the report. I mean, again, just going back to post-recovery, the Manchester residents need investment. They will desperately need jobs over the next few years. This scheme will provide over 1,000 jobs in construction. It will provide over 1,000 jobs in occupation. They are very significant public benefits, and we believe, as set out in the report, that the public benefits that this scheme would generate outweigh the harm.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks very much indeed. I'm just looking to see if anybody is indicating on screen. I can't. Yes, Councillor Lovesey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure as members of the committee, we are all very mindful of these issues about economic recovery and the importance of enabling appropriate development, bringing jobs, both short-term and long-term, to our city. But we also have a duty to weigh up other benefits and important issues to do with the life of our city, which includes its heritage assets. I haven't heard an argument that this site wouldn't be viable unless it has such a high building on it. Currently, we have a 9-storey building on it, and when you stand on that corner of St Anne's Square, it's completely invisible. And actually, from that corner of St Anne's Square, I think you can't see number 1 Deansgate either. To me, when I feel I've got to come to a view, I've got to weigh up these benefits, I find that view 1 really absolutely unacceptable. I have to say that. And it may be an anodized and light reflective building, but it's a very chunky building. I don't see any equivalence at all between that view and looking across the top of St Anne's Church towards the Beetham Tower and seeing that building in the distance. It's an altogether different kind of footprint or sky print that one's looking at. And to be honest, English Heritage may not have found them unacceptable, but there's several of the other mock-up pictures that you've presented to us really, to me, don't seem fitting for this area of the city, including the view across from the Passage Square area. So at the moment, we're often given a very difficult choice where we're told, you know, that we've got to have something because nothing else would be financially viable. I don't see that we're being given that argument. And at the moment, I therefore feel very much that I am minded to refuse on grounds of the damage to the heritage assets of the city centre in this area. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Lovesey. Dave?
I believe we've got a proposal from my colleague of minded to refuse. I'd like to say.
Right, okay. So you've seconded that. Dave, did you want to say anything before we...
Chair, there's nothing I can add, thanks.
Okay, so what we have is a proposal from Councillor White. Do you want to run through it again, Councillor White, just for clarity?
Well, the grounds are on loss of residential amenity and the impact on the heritage assets of St Anne's Church, Royal Exchange, and the impact on the conservation area by the overdevelopment of this site.
Thanks very much. That's very precise. And it's been seconded. Now, that's what, colleagues, that's what we're going to vote on. So I'm going to ask Andrew now to take that amendment first, and we'll see how we get on. Andrew.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Shaukat Ali left the room during the discussion, so I won't take his vote.
Yeah.
Councillor Andrews.
Refuse.
Councillor Yasmin Dar.
Refuse.
Councillor Davis.
Refuse.
Councillor Hitchin.
Refuse.
Councillor Kamal.
Refuse.
Councillor Leach.
Refuse.
Councillor Lovesey.
Refuse.
Councillor Monaghan.
Refuse.
Councillor Rysat.
Refuse.
Councillor White.
Refuse.
Councillor Nazrin Ali.
Nazreen, can you hear us? Has your microphone gone off? You were on screen a few seconds ago. Andrew, we'll have to move on. We've lost Councillor Nazreen.
Councillor Curley. Yes, Chair.
We've dealt with that. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. Did everyone get that? Councillor Nazreen Ali, she just sent a message through. She's lost the connection, so there's nothing we can do about that. Right, thanks for that. Item 9 is the next item on the agenda. And this is Breslin Street. This was the stuff that was handed out this morning by the officers. So I think what we'll do then, Dave, is take your presentation, your introduction first, and then we'll move on to the next stage. Thanks.
Chair, I think the members raised a couple of concerns when this came to them 2 committees ago. One was a concern about whether the scheme impacted on Whitworth Street West, and there's a site plan early in the report on page 296, which shows that the scheme is wholly within the site, the existing site, and doesn't impact onto Whitworth Street West at all. And also there was concern about the quality of the scheme and the level of detailing, and we've put a lot of images in the report, and we've provided members with a document which hopefully expresses very clearly the level of detail that there is in this scheme, and that this is a very good piece of architecture and not a poor scheme as was implied previously.
Thanks very much indeed. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for that. Now we have got Glenn Holwell.
Hello. Can you hear me? Hi. My name's Glenn Howells from Glenn Howells Architects, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of this application today. We've been going for over 30 years, and we're very fortunate to have worked in lots of cities, London, Birmingham, Liverpool, but also, very importantly, in Manchester. We built Urban Splash's first new build scheme, and we're hugely proud of our work in Manchester, including the building opposite where you are today, 1 St Peter's Square, KPMG's headquarters, and also 125 Deansgate opposite the John Rylands Library. Both these projects, we believe, are high quality additions to Manchester, but also have learned and have taken a lot from your fantastic city. And all our work has also been worked through collaboration with the planning department at Manchester City Council. On 2 to 4 Whitworth Street, our ambition is to deliver a building which is an exceptional, not a tall building. It's a mid-rise building. It's in context with the scale of the street. There are some taller buildings around it, but what we're looking to do is to bring forward a building that, in quality and scale, respects and enhances the historical character of the area. What we're looking to bring forward is a beautifully crafted building made from brick and terracotta with depth and articulation, clear top, middle and bottom. The building is got depth to it, as some of the finest buildings that we've been studying in Manchester have in terracotta. And it not only makes it look very interesting and adds visual quality to it, but it makes it weather very well. It's durable. And also it offers lots of shading, which is a good thing for the building as well. The other thing I'd like to mention about the building is we're aiming to do a very sustainable building here, BREEAM Excellent. Our client is keen to push the performance of the building. So it'll be a much more sustainable building than the buildings presently on the site. The other thing I just wanted to flag is, as you know, on Whitworth Street, when you look out from the bars and restaurants on the canal side, across the street, the present buildings have got no animated frontages at all. And what we've designed the building to do is to bring animation and life through commercial space, which then animates this part of Whitworth Street. Presently, there's no life there at all. So that's the idea behind the building. Is in essence a building which is definitely Manchester and nowhere else, both in terms of its scale, its detailing and its attention to materials there. There's been discussion, we're aware of the value of the existing buildings on the site. We've looked at them very seriously and considered them, but we agree with Manchester's heritage consultants and indeed Historic England, who have said that the existing buildings, whilst they have some interest, are not of sufficient architectural or historic interest to warrant designation at a national or local level. So in summary, we work closely with your planners and heritage consultants, but we've also sought the support and gained it of your respected and leading architectural advisor, Stephen Hodder, who fully supports these proposals also. So in summary, I would ask members to recognise the benefits of this proposal, that it's really, a lot of it's about the detail. The best buildings that we've worked on, it's all about what they're made of and the quality of the way they handle light and they weather over time. And we would very much look forward to getting your support for this scheme by approving this application. Thank you very much.
Thanks indeed, Mr. Howells, thanks. I'm now going to call on Ward Councillor Jevons, please.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak. At the October meeting of the Planning Committee, my colleague Councillor John spoke against this scheme, raising his own and significant concerns from the local community about the loss of heritage, poor quality architecture and impact of antisocial behaviour. I would like to thank the committee for requesting further information about the architectural quality proposed for the scheme following that intervention. While I welcome the high quality images to aid your decision making, nonetheless the concerns around loss of heritage and antisocial behaviour remains. The area behind the railway station, Knott Mill, is highly residential, and indeed the council's Knott Mill SRF makes the case for it to remain a quiet, residential and creative business-led area. This hotel will threaten the increased dwell time in the area of revellers and encourage the 24-hour activity next to bars and nightclubs, increasing the impact of noise and antisocial behaviour on local residents. These concerns have not been alleviated or addressed. Indeed, the plans for residential development on the vacant site next door to this applicant's site will mean further residents will likely suffer from a decision to approve as well. On heritage, it is worth repeating the key argument that Councillor Johns made then, that heritage means more than just listed buildings. It includes the character of a neighbourhood and the visibility of our economic history, which delivered so much to our city and its people. These two Edwardian warehouses, while not listed, are key reminders of our city's history and have fronted Whitworth Street West for 100 years. From the recessed corners to the arched windows across the two buildings, these warehouses add to the rich character of our city centre, one that successfully blends old buildings with new. Not heritage buildings, not every heritage building must be a standout architectural wonder to contribute to the character and story of our city. In that vein, I see no reason why we cannot retain, incorporate and celebrate the warehouses and their appearance instead of tearing them down for an anywhere budget hotel. We have seen everything in this city centre. We have seen elsewhere in the city centre where old buildings listed or otherwise are saved, retained and incorporated successfully into our city's future. These old traditional Mancunian Edwardian warehouses could still play a role in our city's future, but the applicant has failed to provide the imagination and ambition our city deserves in incorporating their facades into their plan. We must, as a city, increasingly question landowners who buy sites which are home to heritage buildings and seek to tear them down rather than renovate them and ready them for our city's future. We can save a bit of Manchester's history and lay down a marker for the rest of it. Our city's past does not need to be lost. It has brought us great success and should continue to play a role in our future. I strongly urge the committee to reject this application today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Jevons. I think now, Dave, I'm going to ask you to make some comments, please.
Just a couple of points, Chair. Firstly, I think we'd find it very difficult to argue that a hotel is unacceptable in the city centre. I mean, this is the hotels nearby, and I think you'd find it almost impossible to construct an argument that a hotel would not be acceptable in this location. In terms of, it's good to hear that Councillor Jevons has reflected on how good this building actually is, the level of detail, etc., the level of quality. His concern seems to be about the loss of the two existing buildings. There are photographs, I've provided photographs of the two existing buildings in a separate document. They are Edwardian buildings, they are red brick, but there is very little about those buildings that are worthy of retention other than their age and the fact that they are red brick. They're not protected in any way either through a conservation area or listed buildings in status, and those buildings could be demolished at any time. They've been vacant for many years. I suspect it would be difficult to find uses that would make those buildings viable in a way that would allow them to be improved significantly. And you can see some of the poor quality detail in the state of disrepair that those buildings are in. What you are being offered is a good quality building that would sit very comfortably on that site. It's 7 stories. It's relatively low level for city centre. It's probably one of the lowest buildings that's come before this committee for some time. The level of detail in it is very, very high quality, and hopefully you'll be able to support it.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks very much for that. Now I'm going to go to committee. I see Councillor Leach.
Thank you, Chair. My concern about this is more a more general point about the ability of to stop buildings like this from being demolished in the city centre. And as Dave Roscoe has pointed out, this could just be demolished at any time, and there's nothing that we could do about it. And it strikes me that if we want to be sure that we can protect our heritage, and there are some buildings that get listed that are not necessarily of to our taste in architectural merit. I remember when I was in London, there's a particular building that I lived very close to that was, in my view, not worthy of retention, but it was a Grade 2 listed building, the power station. and as a result of it being redeveloped now, it's the big tower, the big chimneys are being retained and probably have no architectural merit at all, but they certainly have historical merit. And so there are a number of buildings in Manchester that are have historical merit that aren't necessarily what we would describe as fine buildings that are of architectural merit. So I have a lot of sympathy with residents who are concerned about these buildings being demolished. And I do think that this is a good example of why we should be reviewing the buildings in the city centre to see whether or not there are buildings that we do need to protect for either their architectural merit or their historical merit. But as Dave Roscoe has pointed out, this could just be demolished tomorrow and there'd be nothing that we could do about it. So I'm minded to abstain on this application because I do worry about the demolition of these buildings, but I don't see that there are any real planning grounds for it not to go ahead.
Thanks, Councillor Leach. Dave?
Just to note that there was a request to Historic England to spot list the buildings, and that was turned down.
Thanks very much, Mr. Roscoe. Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the additional information that we received today. I found that quite helpful, actually, to see the articulation of the brickwork around the windows and the fenestration, and how the architect is trying to have that tripartite approach of a bottom, middle and top, which helps to lessen the impact at street level. I think it's fair to say that side of Whitworth Street West does need some investment and regeneration, and I hope this application will contribute to that, and notwithstanding the concerns regarding losing some historic buildings, although they have been in disuse and partly derelict for a while. My question on the application was, on some of the visuals, there are 3 street trees outside the building, and on some there are 2. I just wanted to confirm how many street trees are proposed, and whether any further street trees could be incorporated to try and improve that side of Whitworth Street West. Thank you.
Dave?
The truth is we'll get as many trees in as we can. So if we can get 4 in, we'll get 4 in. If we can get 5 in, we'll get 5 in. But we know from previous discussions that we've had at committee how difficult it is sometimes to get street trees into this location. So as part of this development, we will get as many trees as we can along that frontage. And there's a similar condition on the site next door should that scheme be brought forward to plant trees outside that site as well. So hopefully a combination of the 2 schemes, should they both come forward, we'll get as many trees as we can, which is what we always try and do.
Thanks, Dave. Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the photographs which you've taken of the sites now, and I'm just curious as to whether any planning officers were the ones who actually put all the graffiti on the walls, you know, to make them look really bad. But I am impressed by the new information we're beginning, especially around the design of the building. And I don't know if you're ready yet, Chair, but I would be quite happy to move the officer's approval.
Thanks, Councillor Andrews. Thanks for that. Anyone else wants to speak? I'm just having a look at the screen now to see. I've no messages on the WhatsApp. Oh, yes, I have got Councillor Lovesey.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I must say I did go and look at the building after last session, to just check for myself what kind of buildings we were looking at, because I didn't necessarily feel the pictures we'd had were, enabled me to make a proper judgment about. I'm generally in favour of trying to regenerate or, using historic buildings wherever we can. And on this case, I'm grateful for the materials we've received, because I think the level of design involved, I feel really happy to be supporting this today, and to see this as a relatively, as you say, low rise, 7 stories is something I think fits in most areas of our city without a problem. So I'm quite happy to support this time. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Lovesey. Thanks very much indeed. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, one observation is that the pictures of the back alleys and the back view of the buildings are interesting. I hope that alone is not sufficient to see buildings demolished, because I think it'll take you around some back streets where we'd find some more examples not too far removed from that. And it is a reminder that we do need to look after some of our smaller streets a lot more carefully. What I do have though as a question is that the detail in these photographs that we, or simulation drawings that we have today has obviously had a major impact on views of members of the committee. Are we absolutely guaranteed that these would actually be delivered and that we wouldn't get to a stage where somebody was saying, actually, we need to slightly redesign in order to cut costs? Because these details tend to add to construction costs, don't they? Can you give some assurances on that?
Thanks, Councillor Davis. Sorry. Yeah, switch your phone on. Thanks.
I mean, these are actually the details that are on the drawn information that was originally submitted. What we didn't convey to you through the images that were provided last time was that sophistication of detail. So the drawings package that you will approve will show this level of detailing. That's in the cost plan, and that's what they've got to build out. I mean, that's what we do with people. You know, we don't let people dumb design down after you've granted a planning permission. We're very tough on that. We really are, probably more so than any other authority in the country. What gets approved, if it gets approved by you today, that's what gets built. Simple as that.
Can I just add that, you know, I know some of that detail, and in terms of materials as well, I know that we are pretty strict on people delivering what they have said they'd deliver, but I did want to make that point at committee rather than in the previous discussions that we've had over the years. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Councillor Paul Andrews and then Councillor Hitchin.
Okay, I'm more than willing to let June go before me, so long as she limits herself to 4 minutes and doesn't repeat anything she's already said.
You have absolutely no chance. Joan.
You've got no chance of that, and I haven't spoke for quite a while, so shh. I don't care what time it is. You're making me speak even longer. You're prolonging the agony now. Come on. Basically, I just wanted to ask, you know, like obviously we've mentioned about the trees, but I'd like to see some more street scene on there, you know, like some more foliage. You know, like I know they've got it on the window display and everything else, but it's a really high potential area. And I'd like to just not see, you know, brick building, obviously, but more foliage as well. Is there anything that could be put in there to encourage more greenery? Can that be put as a condition on the planning consent, if agreed today?
Dave.
I'm not sure what that would be. I think our best chance is to get as many street trees in as we can. I think that's the best way of greening that street. I mean, there's shop fronts. I mean, if there's a restaurant there, they might want some sort of greenery as part of the frontage to the restaurant. But I think I'm not quite sure what. I suspect that it's going to be very, very difficult. But we've heard what you've said, and when schemes come forward for shop fronts, we'll look at what can be done in terms of introducing greenery.
Thanks for that, Dave. Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, Chair. Can I move the officer's recommendation to approve?
Thanks. That's very.
Can I second that?
That's
Chair.
Seconded by. I don't know who seconded that. Yasmin. Thanks, Yasmin. I didn't see you then. Thanks a million. So that's been moved and seconded. Now, straightforward voting on the recommendation to approve. Andrew, will you do the roll call, please?
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Andrews.
Approve.
Councillor Yasmin Dar.
Approve.
Councillor Davis.
Approve.
Councillor Hitchin.
Approve.
Councillor Kamal.
Approve.
Councillor Leach.
Abstain.
Councillor Lovesey.
Approve.
Councillor Monaghan.
Approve.
Councillor Rysat.
Approve.
Councillor White.
Approve.
Councillor Curley.
Sorry, I abstain. I make it 9-4, 2 abstentions. Is that
Yes, Chair.
right? Right, thanks very much, colleagues. Now we're going to move straight on to item 10, and this is 1 City Road East. And I'm going to go straight and ask the
Chair,
office.
could I request a site visit on this?
You want a site visit,
Please.
Councillor Davis. I'm going to seek the advice now of the Director of Planning and see what's the route we have to follow. Director of Planning.
Thank you, Chair. I think I probably answered this a couple of committees ago, whereby we cannot take a request for a site visit from the Chair. There has to be an opportunity for officers to address any concerns raised, because it may be that we can offer some advice back, so it will negate the need for a site visit. Members will need to go through the item first. Thank you, Chair.
Right, unfortunately, we have to hear the presentation from the officers, and then we're going to have to follow the whole thing through, take the people who are going to object, take the agent, listen to the ward councillor, and then at that point, Councillor Davis, you can move that site visit. I think that's what we did before. Right, David.
I have nothing to add, Chair.
Thanks very much. Thanks for that. That's good. Right, so I'm going to call now on Alan Torre.
Chair, unfortunately, due to the length of the meeting, the local resident hasn't been able to stay for the meeting. I'll reference that when I make my speech in a while.
Thanks. That's fine. Thanks for that. So we can now go to Niall Alcock. Niall.
Thank you, Chair. The applicant, Marshall CDP, is delighted to be delivering this important project. They have a proven track record of delivering high quality buildings and public spaces in the city centre. Notably, this includes the transformation of Lincoln Square and the reinstatement of the Manchester's Peace Gardens, which is currently under construction in partnership with the City Council. They now bring their expertise and vision to the First Street area. The officer's report comprehensively addresses the objections received. However, I would note that the proposals have been developed through full consultation with officers, consultees and the public. They've been subject to a full suite of technical assessments that demonstrate there are no unacceptable impacts of development. The scale is entirely appropriate to its location. Indeed, it will act as a transition between the much higher rise development that is emerging around it and the existing buildings around City Road and Knott Mill. The existing building on site is dated, unviable office accommodation, dominated by surface car parking and providing no address onto the street. The application site is at a pivotal location between First Street, Great Jackson Street and Knott Mill, each a regeneration priority for the city. The Council endorsed an addendum to the First Street Strategic Regeneration Framework in July, which focuses on the sites along the west side of Medlock Street. The SRF acknowledges the finite supply of land in the city centre and seeks to ensure that the momentum gained in the First Street area to continue the regeneration of this part of the city and enhance linkages into the surrounding areas. Development should extend the emerging density of development across First Street, deliver new and enhanced pedestrian connections to knit together First Street, Great Jackson Street, Hume and Knott Mill, create front door addresses onto Medlock Street, making this a street again rather than a car-dominated through route, and extend high-quality public realm westwards, including new tree planting and greenery. The proposals directly deliver in this vision and support the Council's strategic objectives across the city centre. It will transform the street scene and bring activity to Medlock Street and City Road East. Shortcroft Road will become a verdant space to dwell, with rain gardens, tree planting allotments and a pocket park, all to the direct benefit of existing communities. The winter garden between the buildings will create a new connection through to First Street, and be a unique public place in the city. Minimal parking is provided, contributing to the city's sustainable transport strategy whilst ensuring appropriate accessible provision. The buildings should achieve an almost 28% improvement on emerging CO2 building regulations, contributing to the city's climate change framework. Construction will bring about 4,000 direct, indirect and induced full-time equivalent jobs to the city, creating over 174 million GVA. Once operational, it will accommodate almost 3,000 full-time equivalent jobs, generating almost 214 million annual GVA and contributing over 2 million per annum business rates. Developments such as that proposed in this application will be critical to the city's economic recovery from the COVID crisis. I therefore respectfully request that the members resolve to grant planning permission in line with the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks indeed. Thank you, Mr. Alcock. Thank you very much indeed. Now I'm going to call upon Councillor Javins.
Thank you, Chair. And could I just again pass on the apologies of the local resident that wasn't able to stay. It does not reflect on the importance of his feelings and other people's feelings against this application. In fact, if anything, it goes to evidence the fact, as a person that works from home in City South, adjacent to this building, he, like everybody else, has a different work programme and uses his own living space in a different context these days. I'd also like to say that I'm not anti-development as a nobody in this building, but a development has to be appropriate and form part of our economic recovery. So thank you for allowing me to speak and support I'm doing it to support the numerous objections that residents have made against this application, and it has attracted. Like them, I'm concerned about the direct impact on the established communities in the adjacent buildings, City South, the Nile, Medlock Place and Lumiere. This application would directly affect more than 400 apartments, and that's in excess of 1,000 residents. You have seen the range of more than 50 objections in the report, and I'm unconvinced by some of the arguments made to discount them. The current building on the site is a relatively low level, and because of its design, has minimal direct overviewing of residents' apartments. Its ground level car park acts as an active buffer between itself and the next door apartment building, City South, and the mature trees that line the street and the parking create a positive and natural barrier. All of this will be lost by what is seen by many as overdevelopment and a desire to maximise the site to the detriment of the people that live here. The First Street development framework is referenced in the document and was mentioned a minute ago. I'm happy to acknowledge it needs to be considered, but this was drawn up and amended to set a tone to develop the area at a time when there's substantial empty plots at this gateway to the city centre, not to knock down and exploit the ones that already exist. The Great Jackson Street framework, which is also referenced, as a contrast, identifies residential development as a preferred option. Again, this application ignores this. Many of the objections focus on loss of light and privacy. The report acknowledges this by saying, and I quote, "There clearly is an impact on sunlight, daylight and overlooking. But the reasoning to ignore this is that it has, and I quote again, an unusual open aspect. Again, something that the applicant is happy to exploit, but to the detriment of neighbours and residents. My other key concern is the loss of mature trees. Much is made in the application of potential replacement, but mature trees create the character and feel of the environment we enjoy. They are more effective in absorbing carbon, and any replacement will not contribute positively for many years to the global challenge, which as a city we have signed up to positively improving. You have heard from you should have heard from one of the affected residents today. You have had the opportunity to read the comprehensive objections, and I have highlighted several key issues. For this reason, I'm asking the committee to reject the application, or if it would help, to visit the site. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much indeed, Councillor Jevon. Thanks very much indeed. Right. Dave, do you want to come in at this point?
Chair, there's just one point I want to make, really. Councillor Jevons, when he referred to overlooking impacts on daylight, sunlight, etc., he said they were ignored. That's the wrong terminology. Those impacts have not been ignored at all. They are fully considered in the report in the way that those issues should be considered and are always considered by the members. And we have to make a judgment on those in the context of the guidance within BRE and in terms of our own amenity standards that we have an organisation. So those impacts have not been ignored. They have been properly considered in the context of the site, in the manner in which those issues should be considered. I think the rest of the issues are clearly and comprehensively set out in the report before you.
Thanks very much indeed, Dave. Councillor Davis. Switch your mic on, John.
I would like to request a site visit. There is a large number of objections to this development. The consultation, a lot of this consultation has gone on through the pandemic, and I don't think that people were as engaged in the early stages as we might normally expect. We've shown just now a concern for privacy. I think the issues here are slightly different, but the would best be served by allowing councillors to have a closer look at the outlook. This is a long-standing community in City South, the Nile, and the other buildings there. And they've had a fair amount of development going on around them, and they haven't, by and large, come out in numbers like this to object. So I really would like to give that location a closer look. The committee will be aware of the general location, but I think a visit would highlight some of the specifics for these residents.
Thanks, Councillor Davis. So you move in a site visit. Is somebody seconding that? Councillor Hitchin, Councillor Leach? We have loads of people seconding that. So Andrew, it's straightforward. Request for site visit. Andrew, over to you for the roll call.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Andrews.
Agreed.
Councillor Yasmin Dar.
No, I don't agree.
Councillor Davis.
Agreed.
Councillor Hitchin.
Agreed.
Councillor Kamal.
Refuse.
Councillor Leach.
Agree.
Councillor Lovesey.
Agreed.
Councillor Monaghan.
Agree.
Councillor Rysat.
Agreed.
Councillor White.
Agreed.
Councillor Curley.
I'm abstaining, Andrew, so I make that 9 for, 1 against and 1 abstention.
Yes, Chair.
Right, thanks for that. Item 9 is item 10 now is the final item on the agenda, Jesse Field and this Bath Road, and this is, sorry, it's item 11. Yeah. So this West Didsbury. Now we have got. Des, do you want to introduce it, please?
Yeah, nothing to add at this point, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mr. Jones. Thank you. Chris Butt is going to address the committee. Chris.
Ask him again, Chair. I think it took a while to load him in. No, he's there. You might have to ask him again. It's just took a while.
Mr. Butt, can you address the planning committee now, please?
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Butt. I'm McCarthy & Stone's planning consultant. My client is delighted to present this proposal to you today. The scheme will deliver 34 much-needed retirement living units, formerly known as sheltered housing, that will help address the existing and growing need for older persons accommodation in Didsbury. My client has been looking for a suitable site to bring forward this type of specialised accommodation in the Didsbury area for a number of years. Its previous development at Souchet Court was built over 20 years ago. The fact it has been such a long time shows that well-located sites to meet the needs of this form of housing and its older occupiers are very difficult to find and secure. The scheme will deliver a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments together with a range of communal facilities centred around the residence lounge. The scheme will also have a guest suite for family and friends to visit, a pavement scooter store, day manager and 24-hour care line to help ensure the safety and well-being of the residents. My client has delivered well over 1,000 of these types of schemes across the United Kingdom. And on the basis of this experience, I can advise you that on their entry to the development, the typical resident will be around 79 years of age and will be downsizing from a family home in the local area. Hence, as well as providing specialised housing for older people, it will also free up under-occupied family homes in the area. Our architect has worked closely with an urban designer, and we believe that the scheme represents a high-quality design that will be sympathetic to the character of this part of Didsbury. The vast majority of the existing trees, including all those that are protected, will be retained as part of the development. The nature of the scheme is very passive, and the level of activity will be significantly lower than that which would be generated if the scheme were to be developed from either open market flats or housing. We are confident that the scheme will be a good neighbour and it will not adversely impact upon the amenities enjoyed by existing residents. Hopefully, if any of you have an existing McCarthy and Stone development within your ward, you'll hopefully appreciate that point. There are no objections to the development from the statutory consultees, and the principle of the site's development is agreed. Whilst your officer has cited concerns relating to the scheme's design and impact on neighbour amenity, we respectfully suggest that these are overstated. We believe that the scheme will be a successful addition to both the area's character and townscape without any material detriment to the amenity of existing residents. The proposal will also deliver specialised housing for older people with its attendant proven health and well-being benefits, something which is recognised by your officers, as well as the government, which has identified the delivery of older persons accommodation as a critical need. The scheme represents a highly sustainable development that will deliver very significant social benefits for older people, as well as significant economic benefits to the local economy. Whilst we do not accept that there would be any material environmental harm as alleged, even if you feel that there is, it is outweighed by the social and economic benefits when you undertake the planning balance. I therefore respectfully request that permission be granted for this proposal. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Mr. Butt. Thanks, Chris. I'm now going to call Councillor Kilpatrick. Richard.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Committee. I know that it's been a long day, so I'll try and keep my comments brief. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to speak to the committee today, Chair. Both Councillor Leach and I have been working with residents in the area, encouraging comments from as many people as possible. And I'd like to thank all of the residents that met with us online and by phone in very difficult circumstances. Onto the application, Chair. As you will have seen from the officer's report, and I will try and keep my comments on things that I actually think are probably a little bit missing from the report. This location is on the southern section of Spath Road and Lancaster Road. The area has had several attempted developments over the years, and some still remember an attempt to make the area a conservation area. For those that may have visited the site or know the site well, you'll be quite shocked to learn that it is not a conservation area. I want to focus on three main reasons to support the recommendation to refuse this application. And firstly is the impact of the application on highways and parking, which is a really important amenity to local residents. The location is between Home Road and Lancaster Road, and the application provides quite insufficient parking for the site. As the developer has already said, the development is aimed at between 70 and 80-year-olds. In consultation with the developer, we were told that it was very unlikely that residents would need the use of a car. Now, I don't know what 70 or 80-year-olds, Chair, that you might know, but I know that many in my local area are still very able and very capable of driving, and certainly it would be unbelievable to suggest that the parking provision provided by this application would be sufficient. Also, Chair, it's important to understand the impact of the highways to the area. I was quite shocked in the report that this wasn't specifically mentioned, but the area between Home Road and Lancaster Road is a blind corner. The access to the site remains only one access from Spath Road. It will increase the parking on roads like Lancaster Road, which is unadopted, and currently, Chair, it looks like the surface of the moon. It's an unadopted road, and you can tell that it's an unadopted road. It would certainly be unsafe for anyone to park on there, and as a result, people would be parking on Spath Road, which at the minute has horrendous speeding issues, and as I've said, will be a blind corner. In my view, it would make the highways in this location extremely dangerous. Secondly, the development is a clear overdevelopment of the site, replacing a family home with 34 retirement flats. The building would be imposing on nearby properties, especially Home Road and Lancaster Road, and the impact on the street would be very dominating, not in character with the area, and due to the 34 premises, would increase the activity in the area. Not to mention the impact on roads such as Dean Road West, Home Road, Dean Road and Lancaster in the building of the development. Finally, Chair, I wanted to talk about something not specifically mentioned in the report, but I think the developer has touched on it slightly. I think both I and the over 100 residents that I've spoken individually about this application feel that specialist housing is required in the area, but in this case, the application is replacing a family home for 34 flats that will inevitably, Chair, be unaffordable, losing a family home so that a developer can crank up the yield on a garden in Didsbury sets a very dangerous precedent. One where gardens become an investment opportunity instead of a football pitch or a playground or an area for a family to enjoy, making our community more unaffordable and less accessible. It will not open up family properties, as the developer has suggested, as the average house price in this area is over £500,000. What this area does critically need is affordable housing, and that's what's not on the table here. To then compare this application from the 2005 application, which is the one it closely resembles, which was refused by a planning committee of this council and also by the inspectorate due to the size of the development, the impact on neighbours and the loss of amenity. Upon appeal, the inspectorate specifically mentioned the four-storey nature of the 2005 development, and this application is also four-storey. And so, Chair, I would suggest that there is no difference between this application and the 2005 application in the substantiation of its overdevelopment, and in a similar manner, I'd ask the committee to refuse this application.
Thanks for that, Councillor Kilpatrick. Councillor Leach.
Thank you, Chair, and I think I have to leave after I've spoken. I would like to endorse all the comments by my ward colleague and just want to really focus on just a couple of points. First of all, I think it's accepted by everyone that McCarthy and Stone do build excellent accommodation for older people. And the quality of the accommodation that is proposed here is not in question. The biggest concern that residents had was the impact of this particular development on the existing site and its impact on surrounding properties and the environment. But I really want to focus on one issue, and that's the issue surrounding parking. Some members of the committee may have been around long enough to remember a previous McCarthy and Stone development in Chorlton on Albany Road at the old Cosgrove Hall site. That was approved and we were told at the time that it didn't require 100% parking because the majority of residents wouldn't have a car. It was very close to local amenities, so people would be able to walk to the supermarket. So a much reduced number of parking spaces were acceptable. The reality is that people who buy McCarthy and Stone retirement homes, retirement properties, often are still fit and able, and in order to be able to afford a McCarthy and Stone property, people tend to be slightly wealthier pensioners than in other developments. So they're far more likely to have a vehicle. In the case of this particular development at Jessiefield, this is actually further away from the town, either Didsbury Village Centre or Burton Road or potentially Northenden. All three centres are some distance away from the development. So it's out of the norm for a McCarthy and Stone development. And therefore, residents who would live in this development are far more likely to have a car than they would in other older persons' residential accommodation, but also far more likely to have a vehicle than if they lived in other McCarthy and Stone developments. So I would urge, Chair, that an additional reason for refusal is added to this, because I am concerned that it doesn't make any reference to the insufficient parking at this site. And in fact, the report suggests that they consider the parking to be acceptable. My worry is that a future development may come back again with not enough parking available for the size of the development, and that could subsequently be approved. So I would therefore urge members to add an additional reason for refusal, being the lack of sufficient parking for the size of the development. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Leach. I'll give you a chance to. Thanks indeed. Right. Can I call Councillor Stanton now, please?
Thank you, Chair. I would actually like to start by praising my constituents and fellow residents in Didsbury for having been so receptive to development and new home building over the last decade. Didsbury is not an area that objects for the sake of it. We have played and we want to continue to play our part in contributing new homes. When I was reflecting upon my time in the area earlier today, I managed to tally well over 1,000 new homes across Didsbury Point and Didsbury Gate, Dundragon Gardens and Needham Hall, Hodbrook Close, Greenwalk at the former Siemens site, the old Peace Inn Hotel, Silverwood, St James's Place, Hayescroft and Agilia Gardens. However, there are good and there are bad developments, and there are good and there are bad uses for a piece of land. Today, you have a proposal before you to turn a single home and garden into not just a handful, but 34 apartments, a staggering 4 stories tall. Whilst I am of course a fairly new member of this council, I haven't in my time experienced quite the level of objection that this has generated. 116 residents, West Didsbury Residents Association, Didsbury Civic Society, Needham Hall and Dundragon Residents Group, Jeff Smith, our local MP, and myself. You've been recommended to refuse this application, and I'm here to ask you again on behalf of my area to do so. My specific objections are noted in the report. I would like you today to reject upon those that have been already given by officers in their recommendation to refuse. The scale of the development would cause harm to residential amenity with an overbearing structure that would overlook and invade the privacy of properties on Home Road. The development process would result in harmful levels of activity and general disturbance from the increased comings and goings from the new development, leading to an increase in noise disturbance, which would cause unacceptable harm to the residential amenity of existing occupants within the surrounding area. We're short on time, Chair. So in closing, I would like to just quickly thank Robert Shapiro from the Needham Hall Dundragon Residents Group and former councillor David Ellison, a one-time chair of this committee, who have worked extensively on behalf of our community to authentically surface the voice of residents and ensure that they are heard here today.
Thanks very much indeed, Councillor Stanton. Thank you for that. Now, Dave, can I call you in to... oh, sorry, not Dave. We're doing... Sorry, I want to give everything to Dave.
Okay.
You'd like to do something, wouldn't you?
Yeah, please. Thanks, Chair. The concerns of officers are clearly set out in the report, and there's 3 reasons for refusal proposed in relation to the character of the area, the scale, massing of the building, etc., and the impact on neighbouring residents from the car park, its proximity to Home Road boundary, and the overbearing appearance. Chair, with regards to car parking, I know that's been raised as an additional potential reason for refusal, and I can understand his concerns. There's 26 spaces for 34 units. However, given the location, it's fairly close to bus routes. It's within walking distance of Didsbury Village and Burton Road. Chair, it's a sustainable location, and there is on-street car parking nearby. On that basis, officers do not consider that an additional reason for refusal could be justified in this case. I hope that helps, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Thank you very much, Mr. Jones, for that. Can I have some any comments from members of the committee? I'm looking round. Did I see Councillor White?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for the report. And just to agree with Councillor Stanton and Jeff Smith MP's objection to this, I do believe it's an overdevelopment of this site, and for the reasons outlined by the officers, I'll be supporting the refusal. I think it is an overdevelopment of a site in this context. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor White. Any other Councillor Hitchin?
I was just going to say, if anybody's not going to be talking, could we just move to the vote, please? And of the recommendation that's been done forward.
People are ready to move to the vote, I think, given the time. Now, it's straightforward. The report is very straightforward. It's a refusal. Shawkat Ali, because you were not here for the beginning, we won't be able to take your vote. Sorry about that, Councillor Ali. So it's the recommendation, Andrew. And who's seconding the Councillor Hitchin? Right. You proposed, did you? Yeah. What are you seconding it for? So we've got Councillor...
I can't go down in history seconding something you've proposed. Yeah, I'll second it,
Yeah, okay. Right, that's fine. We have a proposer and seconder. Andrew, if you wouldn't mind doing the roll call, please.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Andrews.
Refused.
Councillor Yasmin Dar.
Refuse.
Councillor Davies.
Refuse.
Councillor Hitchin.
Refuse.
Councillor Kamal.
Refuse.
Councillor Lovesey.
Refuse.
Councillor Monaghan.
Refuse.
Councillor Rysat.
Refuse.
Councillor White.
Refuse.
Councillor Curley.
I'm abstaining, Chair, so I make it 9 back in the recommendation to refuse and 1 abstention. Do you concur with that, Andrew?
Yes, Chair.
Right, thanks, colleagues, both those here and those who joined us through the Zoom provision. I just wanted to record that we did have 3 members who forwarded apologies. The Councillor Watson, Councillor Flanagan and Councillor Lyons, so we want to make sure they're recorded. And I just want to wish everyone else well for the festive season. Enjoy the break, but above all, keep safe. Thanks.